The We are live on Leap Day. That sounded like another one bites the dust there, didn't it?
I was literally going to say that. Is that a remix of Other One Bites the Dust? But yeah, I'm going to wear my glasses in honor of Dan Ives, our first guest, though.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, we've got Dan come up in a minute here. You're going to love the story where Dan is and what he's up to right now. But we are so honored and delighted and just excited for so many different people. I see this is on Twitter right now. I see a lot of people have joined, and it's this is going to be a lot of fun. We're honored so many people are joining us for live on Leap Day. Sonu, we're going to bring Dan in very soon. What are you looking forward to today before we kind of bring on Dan Ives?
All of it. I mean, we have some amazing guests, obviously, but it's also I think a way for us to show off what we are made of at Carson, right? Like it's like this is what we do at Carson. I mean, we have amazing people to talk to. We have an amazing team here, all of it. So hopefully everyone on this live stream gets to see all that makes us who we are.
No, absolutely. And, this came as an idea of kind of your and mine, I don't know, maybe a year ago, give or take. And we brought up to the team late last year, and I thought it'd be easy. Like, let's just get a couple guests and start talking. It turns out there's a lot more work.
And we don't mind talking.
They go into something like this. So just so many people are helping kind of on the front lines, behind the scenes. So it means a lot to Sonu and myself and the research team to help promote what's going to be hopefully a really fun 4 hours of talking markets, talking economy, talking life, talking in a cab in Bangkok. Do you see? You see that? You see that segue? Can we bring Dan on the show here, please?
Should we give out titles?
Oh, let's do it in a second. Here we go. Oh, let's do this.
Hey, great to be here.
There we go. Dan Ives. Hello, sir.
How are you? Great to be on.
We are good. So again, Sonu has a good point. I'm Ryan Detrick, Chief Market Strategist with Carson Group. Sonu, go ahead. Your title there.
Sonu Varghese, Vice President, Global Macro Strategist here at Carson Group.
And then Dan, your title and where in the world are you? Literally, where in the world are you?
So right now I'm in Bangkok, Thailand. I'm part of it. It's part of a 2-week investor trip that I'm doing in Asia. And we do these every 4 months. And I am right now in a car from the airport to the hotel in Bangkok with you guys.
How cool is that? From Bangkok to Cincinnati to Chicago.
It's awesome. When we set this up, we didn't quite realize that part of it, but it's an honor, Dan, that we get to chat with you. I'd say you're the hardest working man, and now you're literally in Bangkok right now. Man, person, woman in finance, from Bangkok. Again, what are you doing in Bangkok? You kind of just said, what are you doing again one more time?
I mean, a lot of it is that these trips, and Ryan, me and you've talked about before. I think when there's things like AI, the revolution, things that are happening in tech, you don't find them in a spreadsheet sitting in your 10th floor office building in New York City. You find it out in the globe, right? So like when these trips, they're very important in terms of data points and building the overall thesis with what I believe is the biggest tech transformation since the start of the internet in 1995.
So, Dan, let's start there. Let's just get into one of the big themes you've been talking about on TV, and there's a lot we want to talk with. We have exactly 40 minutes. We have a hard 39 minutes, Dan, 39 minutes. You've been talking about this is more of a 1995 moment versus a 99 moment, because a lot of people say, wow, this feels like a bubble. Look at these moves. Can you talk to us? Why do you think it's 95 versus 99, Dan?
And Ryan, you Sonu, and I think, Cathie and others talk about similar things. Look, I believe it's a 95 moment and not a 99 moment, because this monetization that we're seeing around AI is something only similar that we've seen start the internet. And when as someone that covered tech stocks in the late 90s, that's where there was froth, the lack of monetization. A lot of it was on the come in terms of businesses, and a lot of them failed. Here, this is as real the theme, and I'd say start the internet, and then you could argue, I could just call it a fourth industrial revolution. And I believe that the tech transformation, the tidal wave that this is going to happen across tech, I still believe is being massively underestimated by investors, which is why I call it a 95 moment, but not a 99 2000 hype moment.
That's interesting. I mean, since you're in Asia, I wanted to ask that, over the last decade, we know U.S. markets have outperformed mostly on the back of tech, literally what we're just talking about, right? And it seems like a lot of people, or maybe the next decade it will be different. But now here we are again talking about tech and the Magnificent Seven and NVIDIA and all of that. What's the feeling in Asia? How are people talking about what's happening stateside in Asia, and how you're talking to folks over there about it as well?
Yeah, I mean, just in Hong Kong today, and look, I think sentiment is awful, horror show, Nightmare on Elm Street when it comes to China, right? I mean, it's almost anything but China. It's hard to own China tech, and I think you've seen, and we've seen this the last few years, a huge rotation away from owning China tech toward U.S. tech. And the reality is that you talk about Mag 7, you talk about AI, these themes, where are they happening? Whether it's in the 206 area code, in the Valley, that's where the technology is. And that's why it comes down to, it starts with Jensen, the godfather, obviously the godfather of AI, and what Jensen and NVIDIA's done. But you look at what Redmond's doing, and what I believe now are some of these use cases that are starting to build out. I think investors, they're now on the theme. I think many are looking to see if this is a 95 moment, then we're at the bar and it's 10 p.m., not 2 a.m.
It's a nice way to put it.
That is. So that reminds me, Dan, 1 week ago today, you and I got to hang out kind of at a bar for Josh Brown's birthday. That was awesome to finally meet face to face. Do you do that stuff all the time? Are you just, because you're just like such a celebrity now, Dan? Are you always going to the parties anymore?
No, look, first of all, it was great seeing you, the 513, legend person. I think I love going to those types of events, because also I feel like we're going through something right now that is a once in a lifetime experience relative to the markets. And I think it's exciting to share the experiences. And that's why I love, especially I go over Twitter and, social and media and others. I also like communicating the message to investors, just like we're doing here, right? Because I think it's important that investors understand what this revolution is and also what the opportunities are. Because it's very easy to get caught up with the bears that have been negative on tech for the last 14 years.
Yeah, and it's been 14 years, right? Speaking of tech, I mean, obviously there's so much attention on the Mag 7, the Magnificent Seven. Maybe you can break that down for us. Is it right to think of them all as one single unit, or they all seem, they're all very different? But how do you think about them separately as individual pieces?
I mean, well, that's a great question. Look, I view it similar to how I viewed like the FANG complex. In other words, like there's individual need. You couldn't you look at Netflix the same way you did Amazon, but it speaks to these large cap tech stalwarts are going to lead the revolution. Because even when you look at, I mean, like when you break it down, of course, like it starts with NVIDIA and Microsoft. I mean, if you really,
Right.
I almost break those out because when you think about AI revolution, it doesn't exist without Jensen and Nadella. And I think but that starts essentially what's a tidal wave of spend. Because when you look at what's happening potentially for Google, what's the opportunity? How does the stock go meaningfully higher? It's that they monetize cloud on the enterprise. I'd say the same thing for Amazon. I think the biggest opportunity for Google and Amazon is that they monetize on the enterprise side, on cloud. And then when you look at Meta, the comeback kid for the ages, the opportunity there is really how they next monetize on the consumer side when it comes to digital advertising. And I think and that's something where I look at Meta similar as how I view Apple today. In other words, like I think Apple and Tesla, we'll call them like the part of the Mag 7 right now, they're in like detention, or they're writing on the board, I will not do something. Those are ones that are kind of separated. But then when I look at Apple, I believe AI is going to be the renaissance of growth. I think they announced something this summer. I think AI functionality gets put into iPhone 16, and you have the biggest install base in the world. And many times over the last decade, Apple's been counted out, and that's been the wrong move. I'd say the same thing with Tesla. In other words, it's easy to say EVs is done, growth story is done, but I disagree. I think we're in the middle. I think we're in the middle stages of what's the next growth piece for Tesla as they get through. It's been a very difficult price war, compression, and obviously, some of the antics we've seen from Musk, which is definitely like further agitated investors.
So Dan, that's funny. I've got the image now of Bart Simpson, but like with Meta over his face, writing on the board for getting in trouble. Let's talk about Tesla for a minute here. So we called the Mag 7 most of last year, and for a while now. Has Tesla kind of been kicked out of the Mag 7, at least according to the media? And you're saying you think they're going to be invited back to the party soon enough? Is that what you're saying?
Look, I'm saying like there may be like got kicked out of the party. They're waiting to get back in behind the velvet rope. Yep. But they're not done. In other words, like you can't. They're going to be an important piece of the AI revolution, of full self-driving, of autonomy. I mean, I could argue like Apple getting it. Obviously shutting down Project Titan. A lot of the stuff that we're having EVs, like they're going to gain more and more share. The question is, do they just suffocate competition? $30 billion of cash. Just continue to knock down margins, and then just on the other side, that much more successful? Or do they hold the line on price? That's like right now, that's the decision for them. But look, and for anyone watching, like the way that I've always called stocks, it's identify the theme, identify the winners, but also navigate the periods of white knuckle period. Because as you know, as an analyst, these are not, many, if the wind blows the wrong way, they downgrade a stock. So it's like, and I feel like in periods of white knuckle, that's where investors need the most hand holding. But just a good example, like let's say, like I know we're going off topic, but like last week, Palo Alto, one of our top names last decade, they report soft earnings, lower guidance. Investors are like, story's over. 10 downgrade, stock goes 260. It's what 320. I mean, the point is like that story's not done. It was a reset, and it was the next phase of the growth story.
Well, you saw probably Nancy Pelosi bought deep in the money calls on that particular company, much like she did with the video late last year. So maybe there's
the best trade, the best
there.
trader out, the best trader out there.
There you go. Dan, I just want to make sure. So have you had a chance to retweet this? I tagged you. I just want to make sure we can get this to as many people. And again, everyone, this is live on Leap Day with Facts versus Feelings, Ryan and Sonu, along with Dan Ives coming up. We've got about 30 more minutes with Dan. Then Cathie Wood will come up at the top of the hour in about 45 minutes. This is and Dan live from are you at the hotel yet, Dan? Let's get the live update. Where are you? You're in Bangkok. What's going on?
Okay, I just landed. I just got to hotel. I will be on video in probably 2 minutes.
Cool.
Okay, somehow I'm excited to see what you're wearing too.
I know people might not believe we're talking. Would you believe we're talking to an AI Dan Ives right now? People want to see the real Dan. They don't believe it's you, Dan.
So this, okay, now again, this is part. Is it an AI Dan Ives or is it real? That's the question. And the thing is, these are all things that you only find out with Sonu and Ryan.
There you go.
There you go. We'll wait till he comes live. I'm waiting to see whether it's the orange shoes or the pink jacket or.
Oh, there's a lot of it's true. A lot of excitement, Dan, of what you're wearing. That's for sure.
Okay.
But just coming back to Tesla, and since you're in Asia too, the EV story I think is the electric vehicle story is global, right? And it sort of has to be. What about BYD? Where does that fit in? I don't BYD. Build your dreams, right? Chinese EV company. Where did they fit in the picture with respect to EVs, the global EV picture, and then where does Tesla fit in relation to BYD as well?
Yeah. So, look, I think for BYD, you got to give them credit in terms of what they've done. I mean, they have definitely.
Well, he might have tried to turn his camera on. We lost Dan for a second. Hopefully he joins back here in a second.
Walking into the hotel there.
Yeah, who knows? He'll join back here. Well, so Sonu, what do you think Dan's wearing? I mean, what's your guess? I'm going to say something green. I don't know. I'm going to say green.
With polka dots on a shirt or something.
I'm here.
There he is. There he is. He's back.
I will see. I predicted the dots.
Here's shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Got pink.
And
then these are I'll show you the sneaks.
This is wild. Ryan, you should run commentary because eventually this will be the podcast too, right?
Well, so yeah, I mean, people just need to see it on YouTube. I'm not even going to watch the video on YouTube later. It's awesome. So you're just in the lobby of the hotel now, Dan? Is that where you are?
In the lobby of the hotel, and But also that's how these trips are. I mean, we're in 7 countries, or 8 countries in 13 days.
Wow. Well, it's just an honor. We've got about 25 more minutes with Dan Ives here. Definitely want to dive into a lot more things. Go ahead, Sonu.
No. Where were we? Oh, BYD.
I don't know where we were. Yeah.
BYD. You're talking about building our dreams, right? Or your dreams. However.
No, but look, the problem in China is just going to be, it's competition, right? It's the price wars. That's the big issue that we're seeing play out. And I mean, BYD clearly has been the biggest formidable competitor, but it's really about price wars that are happening in China. I think that's the biggest concern. Look, that's why Chinese EVs right now, you've seen so much pressure on these names because just of the worry what's on the horizon.
Right. And speaking, from America, basically, do we just keep them away with tariffs?
Look, I don't, the shame is, as I spend a lot of time in China, the actual BYD car, and I'd say Neo as well. I mean, they're special cars. Like I think a lot of the cars coming out of China, phenomenal. I just think the reality in this geopolitical landscape, like I just don't see a scenario where you have a BYD dealership in New Jersey, at least as of right now. I'm not saying in the next few years, at one point you don't see it. And look, for them, I mean, they're going to expand in Europe, but there's no doubt, like the U.S. market is it's closed for now.
Right. And speaking of EVs, like Apple just announced that they're moving from EVs to AI, right? Which seems like the theme of what's going on anyway. What do you make of that?
I think that's the right move. I mean, look, that's been a decade of just pain and frustration. It had good intentions, but they essentially spent what, 8 to 10 billion on that. And I think, but look, for now as an investor, you want to see them all in on AI. That's what you're focused on. And it's one where it was tough. They needed to rip the Band-Aid off, but it was the smart move.
Interesting. Go ahead.
So,
Ryan.
yeah. So Dan, let's change gears for a minute here as we hit, about the halfway point, give or take. What I love about you is you've been right. Obviously, you've been right in a lot of ways, which is tremendous. But you know what? There's been a lot of other people who've been right. But what I love about you is what we just talked about. People love your personality. They love the way you dress, kind of wild. I mean, I'm not saying that's a shtick, but I'm saying what you found is your right niche, that people understand who Dan Ives is, to see your personality every time they watch you on TV or listen to your voice. Can you talk to some young analyst who's out there? Is that important to have a little bit of a niche to make yourself stand out? Because to be honest, I've used a little bit of a niche, kind of using humor and stories throughout my career. You obviously do that as well. What do you want to tell someone who's younger who wants to be the next Dan Ives out there? What should they do?
No, and look, a lot of times, like people reach out and they ask like questions like that. And look, I view it as, look, my personality has always been the same, right? I mean, going back to Long Island days, back in the 80s, I think as an analyst, I started doing this in the late 90s, right? And I think I recognized early on, and I think it's important, just like you do, Ryan, where you understand like what your advantages are and maybe what your disadvantages are. And I felt like I was a relationship individual. That was one where I was able to communicate messages in ways that people understood. And also a lot of it is like, I've always dressed different ways, because also like that's more my personality. I think in social media and it's enabled to actually now, like, more individual investors that don't know you personally get to know it. And I think also it's like, look, I'm comfortable in my own skin. And I think it's important to you develop, I wouldn't say it's a niche necessarily from a fashion perspective, but I do think it's important that like you do things the way that you feel good and you're comfortable with. So in other words, like if I'm here in Bangkok and I'm in meetings tomorrow, I act the same as I act on TV, on the podcast, as I am with you in New York last week. Like, it's like, it's very consistent. And that's like, I'm also like, I love Twitter. Obviously like the good Tom Lee, yourself. I mean, there's many that have similar viewpoints, because I also love connecting with individual retail. Like I just individuals, because also I like taking all the stuff that I've done for 25 years, taking that message and trying to communicate it.
Yep.
Because I think it's and Ryan, like, you and Sonu do such an awesome job as well, right? Like, I think you're probably one of the best out there, just breaking things down, taking away the mystique, and trying to put it in ways that people actually like understand. But that's really what I do from a tech perspective. But also, like, the reason I travel, 200,000 miles a year, whatever, is that like I'm not gonna find the themes and the winners in the 10th floor of my office building in New York City.
That's such a great way to put it. And it's so cool that you put your personality forward, right? And it's the same. whether you're on TV. And I'd like to think actually Ryan too, right? Ryan and me have been working together, 18 months or so. And Ryan, trust me, for everyone listening, Ryan's the same. Whether he and I are out getting a milkshake or whether he's on TV.
Yeah.
Because also I love, like, the reason I love doing all that stuff, my whole career and stuff like that, I like taking complex messages and distilling it. That, because a lot of times, like, like yesterday in Hong Kong, right? Some guy, like, I was getting pizza. There's this one pizza spot I love in Hong Kong. And some guy came up to me after. He's like, hey, I just want to say, because of you, I bought Apple 5 years ago. Thank you. I watch you on Twitter. Now, it's not about, like, me, but it's like that guy, like, it's a connection that he connects by, I'm able to maybe sometimes take things, not that you agree or disagree, but at least that's how I've done it. And also, a lot of times you go to your own beat, right? Like a beat of a different drum. And I think it's important that everyone, like, does what's comfortable for them and build their own persona and brand, right, Ryan?
Tell me he picked up your tab. I mean, you told him by Apple 5 years ago. He buy your pizza?
Exactly.
One
like,
more for me, then Sonu jump in. So this is a question actually Sonu came up with, but I think it fits. So it was Apple amazing 5 years ago. And again, we're not really allowed to give recommendations, so this is not like a recommendation from us. But Dan, what are some names that you like on the tech side of things that honestly people aren't talking about, that are smaller, under the radar, so to speak? That could be the next, I'm not saying the next Apple, but you know what I mean, the next big winner 5 years from now.
First, I think, and you and I just realized, like, when Sonu has, like, the Ph.D., like, after, is that kind of like, is that like a little, like, ode, like, almost like, hey, I'm smarter than you? Like, do you think, is that like a little, no, like, but like, when he puts it there, is that a little like, hey, just so you know, I'm a PhD and I stay at a Holiday Inn?
Well,
No, but
and I'm not. I've got my PhD in engineering. I don't do that anymore. So
I know, but when you say you're a PhD, I think right away it's like, it's a little like drop the mic moment. Just giving you some cred there. No, but Ryan, I think, like, to me, it's all focused right now on, like, second, third, fourth derivatives of the AI revolution. Like, that's all we're focused on right now, is that, and that's why there's names like the Messi of AI, Palantir, MongoDB. You look at names like, I'll names like C3 AI, SoundHound. I look at names on the cybersecurity side, Zscaler, they'll report tonight, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto, CyberArk, Tenable. I think we're heading into a period of time where, skating to where the puck's going, the focus is really, okay, the cab driver here in Bangkok knows NVIDIA and Microsoft are in the AI revolution. That's and we could argue price. I still believe NVIDIA goes much higher, as well as Microsoft. But I think, and I'm sure Cathie and everyone's going to talk about it as well, I think the focus is, who are the names, second, third, fourth derivative of this tidal wave of spend over the next 6, 9, 12, 18 months, that benefit that's not being priced into the stocks.
Interesting. And coming to, like, outside of the big, large tech names, what's the story with super microcomputer? That thing seems to be on fire.
Look, but they're like right place, right time. And you could argue, like, stock got overhyped, but I mean, they have a phenomenal market opportunity. They are significantly tied in terms, I'd also say TSMC and others, in terms of the AI spending wave. And I think investors right now, it's price discovery. Like, so when you go through price discovery periods, and you guys know this so well, you're going to go through periods where, okay, like, is the stock overhyped here? Is it here? But I think that's one, like, if they execute, there's no reason that's one where still better days could be ahead.
Interesting. Yeah, and it's run up already.
But it's also why, like, that's why, like, I'm not a fan, and I never have been covering tech my whole career, to look at a stock, say it's expensive, and that's why I can't own it. Because I think for the elite ones, okay, the Djokovic of tennis, is he just a tennis player? Is Curry just a basketball player? Is Tiger just a golfer?
Is Sonu just a doctor?
Like,
No,
like,
don't ever
is
call me a
Sonu,
doctor.
like,
I'm terrified of that.
is Sonu just a doctor?
Or a
Is
PhD?
Ryan, is Ryan just a guy that lives in the 513? See, these are all questions that you have to ask. But the point is, like, for the elite transformational tech names, you can't just put them in the 1 year PE box. You have to look where, like NVIDIA. Okay, if this all goes through, where are earnings in 25, 26, 27? Munster does this a lot as well. Like, it's like, that's the way that you see the forest of trees, others see the trees. And that's how we look at names. That's how I think you identify them from a valuation perspective. I mean, Cathie, she'll talk a ton about this. Now, look, like investors could be like, oh, 2040, that's, remember, it's all relative to your time. But I'm saying with the AI revolution, we're not talking about 2027, 2028. We're talking about second half of 24, 25. And I think the one thing a lot of economists are not factoring in, I think a lot of these numbers go materially higher over the next 12, 18 months when numbers now start to reflect this tidal wave of spend that's now hitting the waves, and we're seeing it in software.
Yeah, we're seeing that in some of the macro data, all the industrial production of computers and electronic products, things like that. I mean, it just seems to be on fire, right? Like even as overall industrial production, everyone's like, oh, look at PMIs and all of that. It's very depressed. But there's, like under the hood, there's something going on. It seems like something's in the air, literally to your point.
But and also, so like, you don't, like, if you buy a GPU chip from NVIDIA, and for anyone watching, I think it's very important. There's a multiplier that we believe is 10 to 12x across software and services. So start to think about that from a numbers perspective. That means the data center that's quadrupled from NVIDIA, it doesn't stop with the godfather of AI. Now, Copilot, use cases you got to build, where that's happening. And that's why you see names like Mongo, Palantir. I mean, obviously, Snowflake's a good example of one, like, a lot of hype, great company. They misexecute, stock got crushed. So there's going to be names like, if you misexecute, stocks are going to get crushed. But the stories are not necessarily done. Go back to a week ago. Palo Alto goes from 360 to 260, 10 downgrades. Cybersecurity, Zscaler, CrowdStrike, all down 10, 12%. Now look where we are a week later.
It's funny what you describe as, I think it's so important that what a lot of people miss is, you mentioned that it's not just about the data and numbers and next 12-month PE ratios. There has to be what's the story, right? What's a longer term story? It gets to, I feel like, and maybe you can describe it better than I can, like your edge, right? Like Ryan said, you've got so much right? What do you think you've done different than anybody else, like, other analysts, really?
I think we've like stuck to our, like, a process. So like a lot of times, like, every day you're getting investor feedback that could be negative, peers downgrading, maybe even internal, right? Everyone's like, oh, are you right? Are you right? So it's very easy, like, to question yourself.
Sure.
And I think maybe it's like, it's doing the due diligence and doing the work to have comfort, stick to the thesis, get loud, get investors out there. And I think it's just like that. But like that for us, it's like that's how we identified Apple when they launched iPhone. Many people, I think, we're known for kind of like the iPhone and recognizing that, and then recognizing Tesla, right? Like those were the two big ones. And there were many periods where, remember, iPhone launches in 2007, 2008 financial crisis. People be like, this is just the next BlackBerry. It's done. Like it was a great AT&T release. So I do think it's very important as the individual investors, like everyone has their process, and sometimes the noise. But that's why, like, things like you guys do, Tom Lee and others break things down in ways that sometimes maybe condenses it.
So we have about 10 minutes to go with Dan Ives on live on Leap Day with Facts versus Feelings. We're honored, Dan, you could join us. I wanted to talk a little bit about
and
Bitcoin.
Now on video too.
We've had questions on Bitcoin up over 60,000. Do you follow that much, or what's your take on cryptocurrencies here?
I mean, we follow more from blockchain,
Okay,
because there's a huge tech angle, and blockchain I think is probably going to be one of the biggest functional areas of crypto. I think there's a lot of use cases, especially when it comes to cloud and the cost of managing data. So I view it more from a blockchain perspective as a use case for crypto, as opposed to the actual, Bitcoin and where we see the price going.
I was thinking about something you said. You mentioned the iPhone, how that was a big deal, despite the financial crisis. I almost forgot that it came out in 2007, just before the financial crisis.
Oh my God. I mean, I could tell you stories. I remember it's somewhere in fall of 08. I'm obviously I'm in New York City, Park Ave. I mean, disaster, financial crisis, layoffs left and right. You know what I mean? And I remember I go into a meeting and there's 10 investors there. And I'm like, look, if I could, because I've been on stocks, I'm like, if I could, this is a generational opportunity in Apple. And I remember I have my PowerPoint, and I remember the main person takes the PowerPoint and throws it across this huge table back to me and be like, that might be stupidest call I've heard in my 30 years on Wall Street.
Was that Steve Ballmer? No, I was kidding.
Yeah. And it's type of thing, and that's one where it's well, take a drink of water. I understand you're pivoting from those, but it just goes back in, Ryan. That's why when it comes haters or people that disagree, a lot of time I just view it as more what makes a market are bull and bear. Some of the smartest people I know are bearish. But the other thing that I've always done with bears, I don't tune it out. I actually embrace it. So a lot of times people that are very bearish and my names, I'll go to lunch, dinner with them, do calls that. So in other words, I feel it makes you better by embracing and understanding, not tuning it out. Nah, my kid's the best. No, it's about the teacher. He made honor roll. No, he does nothing wrong. It's instead of that being okay, what did he do? So I have much more of a, I want to understand the negative. I want to understand where we could be wrong. And also maybe because also there's times we're going to be wrong. So it's also times where when we're wrong, like Tesla, we thought the conference call was going to be a good conference call. They were going to lay the groundwork for margins that were, going to plateau. They didn't. And we said, we wrote a note, went out there and be this was a disaster call by us. This was just a bad call. But I think it's important to take credit, but also when you're wrong,
sure,
dude, admit. Too many people, it's they don't admit. Admitting it's not bad. It's you're better because I think what's made our career are our failures. Our failures are what made us better.
Totally.
Not our success. It's where I have 4 companies blow up. When I first start initiating on stocks in 2002, and they're all down 30%, and you come home and you're in the basement, you're should I just do a self riff, or is this, what am I going to learn from it? You see what I'm saying? I feel you learn more from your mistakes.
So I want to jump in there because I love this discussion. I mean, you've obviously had great calls. I mean, you're Dan Ives, right? I mean, we know that. But what are some of the big ones that, I hate to say you were wrong, but just didn't work, that even to this day, man, I can't
Oh my
believe
God.
that
Okay.
one didn't
I'll
work.
tell
Like with
I'll
sports, I can make all the
I'll
time.
tell you
Yeah.
like the worst call. Like, okay, so like FireEye
Mhm.
back in like 2013, they buy Mandiant. So basically, it was a combo of like cybersecurity.
Okay.
And we're be like, this is a 1+1 3 services shop that, and basically it takes off. Stock goes from like 10 to like maybe 200. We're getting it. I mean, we're like, this is go because we view them as a pure play in cyber, and basically like stock went down like 95%. Did secondaries, like anything that could have happened went wrong.
Hmm.
Like I was trying to figure out like where in the witness protection program I'd live. You know, Iowa, because I do like I like basketball, maybe Wyoming. And the thing is, like, it was so bad that it was one where it was like anything that could have gone wrong went wrong. But that's a good example of like I learned from it,
Sure.
took stock, admit, and ultimately because of that, that's actually how we ended up getting bullish on Palo Alto in like 2014. So it's funny, like now people are like, dude,
Mhm.
Palo Alto, it's been an unbelievable name that, but what people don't realize, it was actually a failure with FireEye, a disaster, a train wreck, pick any, analogy, Nightmare on Elm Street. It was like the Thriller video. That's kind of what it was. Like you're walking and wherever like things could go, people are just coming out.
See, there's another theme song we should play
There
maybe
you
on the next
go.
break, right? We had
Yeah.
another One Bites the Dust or something similar. I don't know what it was, but no. Hopefully, look, I know we're coming close to the end of this, but looking ahead, right? I'm pretty sure. I'm hoping we get to talk to you before the next leap day. So
Of course.
3 years from now. But do you think at the next time we talk, we'll be all wearing Vision Pros? And I wanted to get your take on the Vision Pro because Apple hasn't. We talked about the iPhone, then the iPad, but they haven't released a product in a while. So I wanted to get your take on the Vision Pro.
Yeah, but Vision Pro 2 years from now are going to be sunglasses.
Oh,
They're going to be sunglasses for $1,500. That's the way Apple does it. This is about developers.
and
No, Sonu, like that. No, but that's what it's going to be like. Dietrich's going to
Wow.
be sitting there with his sunglasses doing TV in one, and then his spreadsheets on the left side. And the point is like that, but that's going to be a key piece. I think this AI app store, AI functionality with an iPhone 16. I'm just saying, counting Apple out, it's like saying Mahomes was never going to be a good quarterback coming out of Texas Tech.
Nice way to put it.
No, that is. Dan, we have, only like 2 minutes to go. So I'll just kind of give you the floor for any final comments you want as we wrap up our very first guest on Live on Leap Day with Carson's Facts versus Feelings. Dan, say whatever you want for the next 2 minutes. And then hopefully, are you even tired? What time? I mean, it's like midnight or it's like, I don't even know. Are you awake at 10 o'clock at night time?
Almost midnight. Yeah.
Oh, dude,
Wow.
thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
No, it's look, first, thanks for having me. And this is all, and I'm glad the video is second half.
It works.
I look, I would just say this is a fascinating period of time that we're going through. On one hand, you have AI revolution, tech theme we haven't seen since mid 90s. But then, of course, like Fed policy, this, soft landing, no landing. There's a lot of noise. Oh, there's going to be a lot of like potential black swan events, nervousness. Is this over? I would just say, like, pick your themes, pick your winners, have your risk profile, have your whiteboard, and just have a process in place. Like, in other words, as someone that covered techstocks.com, bubble burst, I mean, I had investors, like, I remember, like, I had friends, they were investing in stocks, like pets.com, they're like, oh, maybe I'll buy a boat, and then I'll do this, and then I'll buy and then 3 months later, they're like, okay, I'll move back with my parents in the basement. So the point is, like, I just think it's just important to, like, pick the winners. Some of these names could be overhyped. Focus on the themes and the second, third, fourth derivatives to play these themes.
Awesome.
That's great.
Well, Well, Dan, we're huge fans. You know that. We are
Thank
so
you.
honored you joined us at like midnight over in Bangkok from a cab and now in a hotel. This is just amazing. We'll definitely have you on the Facts versus Feelings podcast. You know, a couple months or so, we can get back into some of these things. But feel free to jump off. Thank you so much. Get some rest.
Thank you.
And we're gonna. So
Good night.
Take care, Dan. See you, man. Bye bye. All right, so let's just chat for a minute or two. We are going to play an Excel promo video in a second here. How good was that? That was awesome.
That was awesome. Yeah, I'm just glad we got to see him live, and
I'm glad he made it, because 2 hours ago we didn't know if we were going to have him
go for a while.
One thing here, guys, before we play the promo video, just give me a second here. We are doing charity today. You know, we thought we got a lot of people together. Obviously, this is free, right? But if you wanted to donate, we hopefully we can share it on the screen right now, guys. It's events.stjude.org/leap day. We have a little charity going on to donate to St. Jude, which is a hospital that helps so many children battling cancer. But the really cool thing is all these donations go to the families. Families literally stay for months on end, unfortunately, but they don't have to pay anything. There it is right there, events.stjude.org/leap day. We'd be honored if you enjoy all what we're doing today, the cool stuff we're giving away, honestly, for free. That's fine. That's what we do. But if you want to give a little bit to that Leap Day or to that on Leap Day, we'd really appreciate it. All right. Well, Sonu, I think you and I get a little bit of a break.
Yeah.
Feel free, Chelsea and Sam, and go ahead and play the Excel promo video at this point.
And we'll be back in.
Okay, so welcome. We fully realize this is the first commercial break we are taking in live on Leap Day. I hope you're enjoying the program so far. Mike, we're going to talk a little bit about M&A and valuations and a tool that we've created to try and help our advisors. So
yes.
Briefly, I'm Michael Belwomany, Vice President of M&A.
And I'm Mike Weger, Vice President of Existing Partner M&A. So, Michael, just in general, though, I think I want to start high level. What are we seeing in the M&A market right now?
It's busy. It's busier, I think, than it's ever been. Fidelity just released their report last week, shows that last year was the second busiest year for M&A ever.
Wow.
And really just by a hair. I mean, we almost had the busiest season of all time. And frankly, I think that trend is just going to continue. We've talked an awful lot about just demographics. We have a lot of advisors that are looking for continuity and succession and trying to figure out what that might be. And I think the number one thing they're finding right now is those second generation advisors frankly can't buy in or afford a business that could be worth much more than they ever anticipated.
Yeah. So when you're looking at a market like that, I think one of the most important things, probably the hot button issue is what are valuations?
Yeah,
what's driving valuations? Yeah. What's my number? How do I differentiate myself? I was just on a call with an advisor today and said, if I'm looking to do a transaction in the next 12 to 18 months, what are things that I can be doing over that period of time that will affect my valuation? So I think one of the important pieces I want to ask you is, what are those drivers? What are we looking at when we're looking at valuation?
It's a really good question. I mean, most advisors are thinking about assets under management. They're thinking about top line revenue numbers. They're thinking about expenses or margin, and all of those are extremely important. I do think growth rate is one of those things that advisors maybe take for granted, and it could be both internal and external. Are you acquiring practices? Are you adding new clients? What are your asset flows? So there's a lot of things that go into that. What are you guys seeing on the internal side or with our existing partners?
Yeah, with the existing partners, a lot of it too has to do with the client demographics. That's a big one.
That's a great one.
Everything you mentioned in terms of growth rate, overall AUM size, average fee is a big one.
Yeah.
It's amazing how you can look at two firms with the exact same level of AUM, but that average fee really does make a difference when you're looking at the financials.
Yeah, it shows up in the revenue.
It shows up all over the revenue. And then the client demographics is really important as you start to look at a book. Again, you look at two books that have the exact same same size of AUM, but the demographics look different. If your average age of clients starting to creep up a little bit, haven't done a good job replacing those aging out clients with new clients, it can make a difference on the value. If you think about it from a buyer's perspective, those are all things that as they look at the health of the business that they're buying going forward, they want to make sure that all of those are in line.
Right.
And so I think on the existing side, one of the things I tell our partners is be looking at some of those KPIs and track them. We've come up with a few different tools lately to help our partners keep track of those KPIs over the years. So I call it kind of a snapshot. Let's do a snapshot today of where your business is, look at those specific KPIs, and a year from now, we have the same conversation, plug in the financials, and see where they're at, just to see where they're trending, in one way or the other on those different metrics, because those are important. And I think if you're keeping track of those, the financials will figure themselves out. If you're focusing on the KPIs, the financials will be what they will be. But it's a good way, I think, for a lot of advisors to hone in not just on the number side, but really on the metrics of their entire business and the health of their whole business.
Well, the why behind the numbers. I mean, everybody wants to know the number, but when you understand what drives that or what impacts that, you can take the steps ahead of time to try and drive that even higher. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
How about client concentration? That's another one we hear all the time. You want to address that real quick?
It's a big one. It's a big one. And I've seen it more and more. You'll have a book of business where, a large portion of the AUM is concentrated maybe in the top 5 to 10 clients. And so not necessarily that is a good or a bad thing. I think you just have to, when you're thinking of the deal structure, you have to be very cognizant of that. And the risk factors from a buyer's perspective, if you're buying that book of business, knowing the risk that those clients, number one, transition over, or even after they do transition, maintaining a strong relationship with them is really important. So it's something that if we notice that in the economics when we're looking at it, we will do something a little bit different with the structure to account for that. Yeah. Do you guys on your side see the same sort of thing? Yeah. Are valuations in general being adjusted, or is it more the terms that are being adjusted?
More the terms. I mean, I think you can solve just about everything with structure as long as there's shared risk between the buyer and the seller, and everybody understands what they're getting into. I think where it gets a little bit dicey is when you see the really high, ultra high net worth client, somebody that's $60 million, people start freaking out a little bit. Right. So when you tie a lot more into retention or stretch those earnouts out, or ideally you have the seller staying involved in the business for a while, 3, 4, 5 years, there's a lot less risk that client's going to walk out the door tomorrow. Yeah,
I mean, the classic line of M&A of you can name your price or you can name your terms, but you can't name both, right? Yeah, so we can always adjust it in one way or the other.
It's a joke for every M&A nerd that's watching this, right?
Exactly right, yeah. All 2 of you M&A nerds out there that are watching the commercial.
Okay, so let's talk about what I have heard is the biggest driver of new traffic on our website, and certainly from a business development conversation standpoint, the valuation calculator.
Yeah, the valuation calculator stemmed from really a need on our side. And the need was for all of our existing partners that are on platform, when they start to look at valuation, and it's in usually the context of maybe a liquidity event for an advisor, or they're doing an acquisition of another book, they have access to our full M&A team. So the existing team is here to help them with that, and we go into a lot of detail, probably painstaking detail, to get down to an accurate valuation. But what we saw was the need was for advisors not on the Carson platform yet, for them to get a general idea of, based off of some high-level information, what does my valuation look like? So we created the valuation calculator as a very simple tool where an advisor can go in and plug in certain metrics of their firm and get a general ballpark range of where value is sitting at for their firm today. And I really like it because I think when you're looking at valuation, we've talked about all of the items that go into it, right? All of the drivers. So of course we're going to have a deeper conversation, but there are some main things like level of AUM, revenue, margin, how many employees do you have, things like that can really give us a good idea of the multiple that you would likely receive on the business. And so that was the intent. And I think we've seen pretty good feedback from that. And I've had a lot of conversations with advisors who have gone through that process. And my favorite is when we dive deeper with them and we do the full valuation, and when it ends up right in that range. I love seeing the accuracy there. So my intent with that calculator is really to not be super aggressive, not be super conservative, really try and get them a good ballpark of an on-the-street valuation.
Yeah, and it is very clearly a range. Like the idea is, here's what it could look like. There are things that drive that up or down.
Yes.
So we start talking about growth rate. We start talking about geographic location. Are you someplace that's desirable for a buyer?
Right.
There's a lot that goes into changing that both ways. So I love that. I love the story too. Obviously, when you get into the full valuation and the number actually goes up from what they saw, that can be a really aha moment and a lot of excitement towards the transaction.
Yeah, and it's been helpful, I think, for a lot of advisors. I've been asking them, what led you to that calculator? And oftentimes you're Googling, financial advisor, what am I worth, right? Valuation calculator. And I think even more and more, yes, are these being used for I'm looking to sell my practice or I'm buying a practice, but even more it's used for succession, right? We're seeing succession be a big topic. We know that the M&A market, like you said, is hot. Valuations are high. That is great for the owner. That can be really hard for the next generation advisor who's going to be buying that practice.
It's almost impossible.
Yes, exactly. So it leads to a lot of good conversation around this is where the number sits and where do we go from there. And I love being a part of those conversations with our partners on how they solve for that.
Yeah, and I think that's unique in how Carson approaches every transaction is that it's very much solving a specific problem rather than applying a blanket multiple. And we should mention multiple is multiple of EBITDA.
Correct.
Not multiple of revenue.
Correct.
But it's solving a specific problem. Sometimes that's us buying. Sometimes that's a partner buying. Sometimes that's us connecting a lender with a second generation to help buy in a portion of it. But there's a lot of different ways that we can approach the transaction and actually complete it.
Yeah, I think the common thread between what you do and I do with existing and new to Carson M&A is it's solutions based.
Yeah,
it really is. Yeah. It's talking to the advisor. What are they going through right now? What problem are they trying to solve? And how can an acquisition of some sorts be the solution for them? And the structure of that can be the key to a very successful solution.
Yeah. So where can we find the valuation calculator?
Yeah, the valuation calculator is on the Carson Group website, so you can find it. There will probably be a link around here too. So go to the website. Even if you just Google, we're one of the top links on Google for finding enterprise value for financial firms.
Obviously, if that sparks a conversation or a desire to have a conversation, please reach out to us. We have really talented people that can call you and explain what you're seeing and walk through some of the valuation metrics. All right, we could do this for another 35, 40, 50 minutes.
Yeah, they told us we couldn't go a full hour.
That's right. We got a lot of guests still coming up. Thanks for letting us share the time with you and enjoy our program.
Okay, we're back. We are back, Sonu.
We're live, right?
We're live. People are watching us. We're live. I mean, let's show our T-shirts. We got a couple minutes till Cathie joins. So we got our T-shirts. We're in the vest. We might take the vest off, but I'm not sweating at all. I mean, I'm feeling pretty good.
So good.
Your vest on? Yeah.
So far, so good. But how excited are you about the next guest?
Oh, well, extremely. I'm thrilled that things worked out with Dan. I was a little stressed there when I heard he's talking to us in a cab in Bangkok. I didn't expect to hear that, but that worked out.
I was like, both of us are having to go, may have to talk about tech for 45 minutes, which...
Exactly. No, I mean, we've got just a ton of questions for Cathie. We'll just kind of see where things go. She's obviously just a pillar in our industry and such a visionary. So it is going to be a lot of fun. I do want to say thank you. I see we've already raised $600. Maybe guys, if we can put that up again, events.stjude.org/leap day. There it is right there. If you're enjoying this free 4-day, not 4 days. 4 hours is enough. 4 days.
4 days is a little much.
4 hours of fun. We'd be honored and delighted if you could give a little donation there. Again, St. Jude's a wonderful hospital that helps children, obviously, with cancer, but no one pays. You go there, you stay as long as you want. Well, you know what I mean. You don't want to stay long, but it helps families. So all these donations to help families stay with their children when the time of need is there, and obviously don't have to pay for it. That's what these donations are for. So thanks to a lot of people who've already donated. We're going to keep doing that. All right, Sonu. So guys, Chelsea, Sam, do we have do we have Cathie? I mean, we'll talk in a minute or two, but we're in a good spot. DM us there
in a moment here.
In a moment. Okay, that's fine. We'll just keep talking.
Shout out to Chelsea and Sam in the background. And,
yes, we just talk a lot. It takes a village to pull something like this off. What stood out to you? Let's talk a little bit more when Cathie makes it. We'll start talking to Cathie. What stood out to you? Kind of real time here, talking to Dan. Just recently there, Sonu.
Two things. I mean, we can talk about like markets and his whole vision, and like all that to come, right? I mean, it is what it is, but essentially, his process. Right, his edge, what's made him so successful. And I think I love the whole piece about learning from your failures And big failures too, right? That's huge. I mean, that's a lesson for all of us. I mean, you and I manage portfolios. We don't get everything right, but I think it's a nice lesson that, when you get things wrong, learn from it, move on, pick yourself up, and move forward.
No, exactly. I mean, we've done this for a while. I've done it for 2 decades. I have made a lot of mistakes over the time frame. But again, like he pointed out, you're going to learn from it. You're going to hide from it. It was really cool. He points out he hangs out with bears. People maybe not bears. People don't agree with so his vision. We see it all the time with social media where it's like, oh, I don't agree with that person, so that person is bad. And now there are trolls and things. I'm not going that route. I'm just saying, but well thought out points of view. It does make a lot of sense to kind of be aware of what all the different types of views are, and then just his personality. I mean, I just love Dan's personality, and that's why I asked him that question about. He dresses a little odd, and not odd, but you know what I mean. Compared to other people, I guess you could say it's odd. He dresses flamboyantly. He dresses like Dan Ives, and I think that's really cool that that's his personality. And he's at a place that lets him. Not all places would let you do that, So it's really neat to see.
And we're in a place that allows us to wear a t-shirt too, so I'm grateful for that.
Well, we're wearing jackets too, but yeah, you're right.
But no, I think it gets to the point that it's so important to be genuine in this business. A lot of people aren't. I think people like to see the real you, and hopefully we bring some of that to the table too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it is top of the hour. What
she's
what are we hearing?
Not quite here, but hopefully she'll be here in a minute.
All right, well, that's fine then. That's fine.
She's coming.
Yeah. So did you get a chance to look at the PCE day? No. What was the
PCE, personal income per consumption?
Yeah,
I mean, there's no surprises. We already knew PCE core inflation would be hotter than the last few months, 0.4%. So that was, it came right on. But markets actually rose. I mean, market jumped on that data because it's one thing to know that it's hard, and it gets to the whole fact about what markets already priced in, right? Markets are already priced in the fact that, it's going to be core PCE was going to be 0.4% month over month. But year over year, we are at, look, big picture, inflation was running, core inflation was running about 6% a year ago. Now it's 2.8, 2.9%. We've made a lot of progress.
Small caps are up more. Small caps still up over 0.5%, kind of leading on today. They've come back a little bit, but again, that's what's that?
I like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, small and mids. So again, I mean, as I look, I got CNBC. Oh, there's Josh Brown, their birthday boy from last week. Yeah, it's up a little bit.
Like she's ready. We can, Cathie's there.
All righty. Well, do we play the intro for Cathie first? Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
Hello, Cathie Wood. How you doing?
Cathie Wood. How are you?
So are you hearing
I think I don't hear audio.
A little feedback.
Oh, my audio's not working? Let me see. Uh-oh. Just a minute.
You can, hopefully, Ryan, you can hear me okay.
I hear you fine. It was really, a little going on there.
Let's just see.
It sounds like it's a
tape. Althea, you're gonna have to get him. Can you? Do you have AirPods in? I turn the Bluetooth off.
Sounds a little better now.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
we're getting feedback. It's like we hear us twice.
Okay, what are we gonna do about this?
I don't know.
Let me get one more. Okay.
That's fine. I'll take your time. All right. We'll figure this out here.
Putting AirPods on.
Okay.
Let's put this back on. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes. Boom.
Okay.
I'm sorry, and I have to apologize because you did such great planning. My assistant set everything up. We did it before time, and then I blew it. So
no.
Hey,
Totally
you
good.
know, we just spoke to Dan Ives from a taxi in Bangkok. So trust me, we're winging it today. I mean, we are winging it. But again, Cathie, we're so honored you could join us today. I'm Ryan Detrick, Chief Market Strategist, Carson Group. Sonu, go ahead.
I'm Sonu Varghese, Vice President, Global Macro Strategist here, and such an honor to have you.
And then Cathie, we all know
thank
you, but just to keep everyone happy, name and title, please. Then we'll get into it.
Yeah, Cathie Wood, CEO and CIO of ARK Invest.
Awesome. Well, so Cathie, we're so honored you joined us here on Leap Day, live on Leap Day with Facts versus Feelings. This is our weekly podcast that Sonu and I do. It's been really popular and growing a lot. And, you know, I mean, believe me, our Carson advisors, Carson partners are obviously huge fans of you. Use your ETFs. I mean, I think we are just so
and
thrilled.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for your
We are so
support.
thrilled that you could join us. We've got, let's see here. We've got about exactly 40 minutes, and it's pretty hard time. So we've got 40 minutes. There's a ton of stuff to ask. Sonu, just go ahead. I know we've got a lot, but just thank you again for taking 40 minutes with us here.
Pleasure.
I'll just start off the beaten path. I mean, not, but how do you deal with your social media presence? I know, you know, there's always, you know, the trolls and all of that. There's a lot of noise. How do you deal with that?
Actually, I don't really pay too much attention to it, to be honest. We've got several social media people here who monitor my account, and you know, they'll flag something that needs serious attention, but a lot of that is noise. So, you know, it's wonderful to have a voice out there, and a voice that, and anyone's voice does this, that, you know, anyone can respond to, and they can say whatever they want. It's fine. It's fine. You know. If they want to vent against a certain way we're looking at the world, then, you know, sometimes that's good for us to know. Like, wow, I didn't know they felt that strongly. You know, this backlash against electric vehicles forever, for example, right now, which is so interesting to me because we know where the technology is going. And so it's a moment in time, but, you know, it's just interesting.
It is. I mean, so Carson Group, we were bullish last year, optimistic wouldn't have a recession. And this time a year ago, you know, like any tweet that I'd send out or Sonu'd send out, we would just be crushed by the bears who apparently knew everything, that maybe things didn't work so well. So you know, let's start. I mean, I love the idea. A couple of different things I want to start with, but you were born in LA, but you chose to, you know, start your company in St. Pete down in Florida. I assuming you're in Florida right now. Why did you choose Florida kind of before everybody else started moving there?
Well, you know, I grew up, I spent 40 years in New York, in this business in New York City. So I moved there a long time ago, but chose St. Petersburg. Of course, taxes are one component, but what we have here in St. Pete is a very optimistic city, brimming with hope about the future, and where we can make a big difference in making that future happen. And so it's growing very rapidly. And the community has really rallied around us. While we were going through that massive bear market in 2022, the community around here was rallying around us. And now we've paid our dues, higher interest rates, and we're coming out the other side. And they feel a part of our success story. So that's a big reason we can make a difference here. We're making a difference in education, in an innovation center to incubate startups, and of course, ARK Invest, hiring people here.
So I've been to the what's the pink hotel right there? What's it called?
Don Cesar. The Don Cesar.
And then there's a restaurant called the Hurricane a little bit down the road. Has like the best grouper Reuben. Is the Hurricane even still there anymore? I have no idea. Do you know?
You know what? Believe it or not, that is on the other side, and so I don't get over there much very often. Yeah,
that's probably the touristy side. But boy, that was a wonderful grouper Reuben. I remember from 10 years ago.
I'll look for it. I'll look for it. It was probably in Paso Grill.
Yeah, I think so. Yes. Go ahead, Sonu. Yeah.
No, I was just going to continue along that line, like moving from New York to St. Pete and starting ARK too. I'm curious what the motivation there was, and, going into how what makes you different from everybody else, and what do you think gives you the edge over, several other stock pickers?
So why did I start ARK Invest? So we've just celebrated our 10th year anniversary. It started 10 years ago. Yeah, thank you. So I witnessed, so having been in the business as long as I have, I've seen a huge pendulum swing back and forth. That pendulum is active management versus passive management. And I would consider benchmark sensitive investing almost passive, basically letting an index dictate where to put funds. What was happening in the aftermath of the tech and telecom bust, and even more so after 0809, I saw the market going more passive, more index-based and benchmark sensitive. And we were moving in the opposite direction on my team in a traditional asset management firm. And I realized it was only that difference was only going to increase given the way that firm was being managed. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to set up a firm that is index agnostic, focused only on the future, first principles research, white sheet of paper, what is an autonomous vehicle. And back then, 2014, we learned very quickly that an autonomous vehicle presented the biggest AI opportunity in the world, but no one was really talking about AI at that time. We bought NVIDIA at 5, split adjusted back then for this reason. And so when I described to someone why I needed to start ARC, it was to fill an unmet need. And I described it to him. He wasn't in the financial business. And he said, "Oh, you mean the future of investing is investing in the future?" And I said, "Precisely. That's why I'm starting my company." And so if you look at our portfolios, and you already recognize this, so thank you, you're very sophisticated, but our portfolios offer a differentiated exposure to innovation, disruptive innovation. You can talk about the Magnificent Six, and we think some of them will be disrupted by the disruptors in our portfolio. And that's fine. You have a core exposure to the market generally. You'll have a lot of the Mag Sixes, but you won't have our names. And if we're right, they're going to disrupt the traditional world order, which is represented by traditional benchmarks. We are the closest you'll find to a venture capital firm and fund in the public equity market. And we also, I don't know if you know this, it's small, so we're just getting there, but we started a venture fund, a public-private venture fund about a year ago. It's an interval fund structure. Anyone can get in. There's no accredited investor limitation. $500, 5% of NAV liquidity every quarter. And, we give you exposure to SpaceX and Anthropic and Databricks and Discord, Epic, and so forth. Deals that many, mid-sized institutions and endowment and foundations cannot access. But because research is our calling card, and because the founders of these companies know that, even though we're tiny, tiny, tiny now, we've just hit $50 million, they are excited that we are on the journey with them.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Now at ARC, let's talk about your company a little more. How many employees do you have? And when you started 10 years ago, I assume it was pretty darn small, but how many and how many ETFs? What's the AUM? Just a little bit more about ARC in general.
Yes. So we actually just bought a small company in the UK to spearhead our entry into Europe. And so now we have 60 people. Before that acquisition, we were at 45. We manage nearly $30 billion right now. And let's see, the ETFs, now that we've just launched ARKB, which is one of the 11 spot Bitcoin ETFs launched early January, I think we're up to ETFs. I'm missing the count, I'm sure, but 8 or 9.
Okay. Nice. One more. You mentioned Europe. Like any good host, I Googled you and saw your Wikipedia. Apparently, both of your parents are from Ireland. I hope that's true.
Yes.
So is St. Patrick's Day a really big deal for you then? See, and you've got some Irish heritage. I heard Europe.
Oh, yeah. Well, I lived in Ireland and I was fluent in Gaelic. I was fluent in Gaelic. I lived on the Dingle Peninsula, which is the southwest tip of Ireland. And back then, they taught school only in Gaelic. Now they would call it Irish. And so St. Patrick's Day, it was much more of a religious day for us, for my family. And so do we party? My parents don't even drink. They didn't drink. My mother took the pledge when she was 13 years old and never had a drink in her life.
I think that was possible in Ireland. I thought that was against the rules.
And my father was ordered to take a glass of wine to calm down at the end of every night. He couldn't do it. So, that role for St. Patrick's Day in our family did not exist.
So in Ireland, they're not turning the rivers and waters green like they do in Chicago here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So one thing struck me when you mentioned it. You mentioned the Mag 6, which is everyone refers to the Mag 7. I'm guessing, the one you've taken out there is Tesla. And you also mentioned like autonomous vehicles being such a key in this AI revolution and something you recognized way back in 2014. Talk about how important Tesla is to the AI story.
Yes, Tesla is the biggest AI project in the world. So we do believe that a company needs to meet 4 characteristics in this AI age if they're going to win. And AI is going to separate the winners from the losers. Number 1, it must have deep domain expertise. So Tesla's expertise is not only battery technology and robotics, because autonomous vehicles are robots, but it is artificial intelligence. It is the only auto company to have designed its own chip. It pulled NVIDIA out, its own chip for autonomous driving. Right now, full self-driving driving, and then ultimately autonomous. It is taking a leaf from Apple's book. You're too young to remember this, I know, but Apple was the only company in the cell phone market to design its own chip, smartphone chip, because it understood that the cell phone was not just a communications device; it was a computer in our pocket. So only one to do that. Where is Motorola, or where are Motorola, Ericsson, Nokia, BlackBerry today? They define the market incorrectly. And so they do not own the smartphone market the way they owned the cell phone market. The same is true here with Tesla. Domain expertise. So it has deep domain expertise. It has AI expertise, meaning it's hiring the best and the brightest. It's taking this very seriously. This is the largest AI project in the world. It has global distribution. And most important then is that it has proprietary data that no one else has. It has orders of magnitude. So 10s, 20, 30 times more data collected of real world driving data, not simulated data. Now, it doesn't care about most of that data. It only cares about what's called the corner cases, those very rare instances when something goes wrong. Right. And it has more of those than any other company in the world when it comes to driving. And so we think this is a winner-take-most market, that Tesla's in the pole position to become the autonomous taxi network of the United States and maybe other countries. And you notice how many other auto manufacturers are signing on to its charging network. So it's already leading the march towards autonomous driving.
You mentioned those 4 characteristics just real quick. I guess the 5th one really is Elon Musk. Right. And
Well, Elon. Yes, Elon. Yes, he is the inventor of our age. And many people say, he's going to blow up. He's just spreading himself too thin. He is not. What he is doing is recognizing that we are in a world today of major convergence of among technologies. So, and he is and we've set up our analyst team that way. Our analyst teams are not set up by sector or industry or sub-industry. They're set up by technology. There are 5 major innovation platforms involving 14 different technologies, all of which are converging now thanks to AI. AI is the biggest forcing function for convergence among technologies. And Tesla understands that. Elon Musk understands that better than anyone else we know. And we see that from Tesla, from SpaceX. You can see he's involved in healthcare and media with X and so forth. Neuralink, transportation, Boring. So he understands how the physical and the digital worlds are coming together now, with AI being the forcing function. So he's not spreading himself thin. He's identified the correct way of defining how the world is going to work, and he's making it happen.
Well, that's great. Now, Cathie, my son was homesick. He just went to the doctor. And here's a little thing that Sonu and I do. We always drink a milkshake whenever we do one of these. My son just dropped off a milkshake because I'm not really having lunch today. So if you see me drinking this, I'm just going to start. That's my lunch today. So it's a little joke.
Right.
When's your milkshake show up? He's having one like DoorDash. When's it coming?
Maybe in an hour or something. I paid as much for
delivery wait an hour,
for
I might start drinking mine now. What's your favorite milkshake, Cathie? You big ice cream fan, or what? I mean, you're so busy. What treat do you like to give yourself to wind down and relax from thinking about all these confusing things all day?
Oh, no, these aren't confusing. This is a puzzle, a giant puzzle that we're just all putting together. And it's just very exciting, and it energizes me. I don't get tired. Winding down, I'm going to say a glass of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc wine.
There we go. Good. So, Cathie, one thing, I mean, of course, we see you on TV all the time. I mean, you're such a great media presence, and I'm sure it's helped your career. But one of the things you said one time, you were talking about ARK, A-R-K-K, from a technical point of view, and this may be a year ago, maybe close enough for government work. You said we could be forming a saucer bottom. You've talked, I think, before about RSIs. Is technicals kind of part of your process? Because I'm a CMT, by the way, so I look at the market based on supply and demand and potential chart patterns. So I love when you said that one time, and I agree. ARK-K, it looks like it's forming a nice saucer bottom. Looks like it might be about to go up a pretty good deal here. Do you use technicals?
So I look at technicals mostly because I know with this quant world we're in, everyone else is looking at them. So I want to know what they're thinking. And so last year it was very interesting. We kept hitting a ceiling on ARK-K of 45. And we couldn't get it. And it was a base. It was a base forming there. And then we poked through that. Now that seems to be a floor. Hopefully, please God. Now that seems to be a floor. And 52.5 is the new resistance. And it is, we hit it almost today, I think. And so I think we're going to see some toing and froing here. However, I've watched bases all my life. The most important base I watched, a technical base, mostly, again, because back then in 1982, I was very new to New York City, and technicians were watching the S&P in this base formation, and they would sell it at the top of the base, buy it at the bottom. And this probably went on for about a year, which is about how long ours is going on since May 22, I think. And sure enough, when it got to the top of the band, that, it had happened so many times, everyone's selling, there's weakness, but it resists that and it pokes through, and then boom, it didn't look back. That was August of 1982. Wow. And it caught so many people flat-footed. That gave me my big lesson about bases. The longer the base, the more powerful the move to the upside. So we certainly are looking forward to potentially compliances, making sure that I hedge everything. But we're looking forward to hour-long base resolving to the upside as opposed to the downside.
Luis Shimada, famous technician, she says, the longer the base, the higher in space. That's an expression. So
there you go.
Long base,
and that's what happened with Tesla. I remember being on with the skeptics on, I think it was Power Lunch. And I remember a trader, he's a trader, and he came to me like, how can you own this stock? And, our trading activity in it added, I think, almost 250 or roughly 250 basis points to performance in 2018, just trading around it. Had we not traded around it, our performance would have been 250 basis points lower, which made a huge difference because 2018 was a down year and we were up, believe it or not. So trading around positions using this kind of analysis. But in 2019, when he said, I don't understand why you're still involved with this. It's just, it fails every time. And I said, hey, you should know this. The longer the base, the bigger the breakout. And what do you know? That year, it broke out.
Yeah, I think it's something that people miss when they, if you look at your position, you're constantly adding and trimming positions. It seems like it totally makes sense. But just to, broadening out a little bit and thinking about AI, Brett Vincent, he wrote a very interesting piece recently, this week, maybe it was this week, about GDP growth, looking ahead. He wrote about GDP, your expectations that GDP would grow 7% over the next several years, next decade, maybe, after adjusting for inflation, which seems like that is, talk about being contrarian.
Seems crazy.
Right? That's like everyone else is talking about like 1.5% or 2%.
Yes.
Everyone else is thinking productivity will be just similar to what we saw over the last 2 decades of 1.5%. So talk about that. Talk about how you're thinking through that.
Sure. If you look at waves of technology throughout history, and you can go back 10,000 years and do this, what you will see is that with every tech wave, and we call this the biggest wave in technology in history, you have to go, but the last wave was not the internet, not the PC, not the transistor, because there weren't multiple technologies evolving at the same time. It was late 1800s, early 1900s, telephone, electricity, internal combustion engine transformed the world. We all moved away from the farm, right? So really transformational. If you look at what that wave did to real GDP growth, it lifted it from 0.6% at an annual rate, where it had been averaging from 1500 to 1900, up to 3% at an annualized rate since then. That was a 5-fold increase in growth.
Wow.
If you look at the consensus forecast now, even though this wave is so much bigger than that wave in terms of productivity, the consensus forecast shows a decaying growth rate to 2.5%, roughly, which we don't understand, actually. We think that 7% could be conservative because that's only a little above 2.5 times where we have been compared to that 5-fold increase before. This is a bigger wave. So we actually think we're being conservative here. And again, I know that sounds crazy, but if you look in the context of history, if you actually use perspective when it comes to economics, you'll see all kinds of things right now that people don't see because they're so focused on day to day. And so in the weeds, having lost perspective, the most interesting one to me today is to recognize that commodity prices, as measured by the Bloomberg Commodity Index, are today where they were in the early 80s. We are not in an inflationary period. The inflationary period was from the late 90s to 2008, when oil prices peaked at $147. And we have been in a deflationary environment since then. And we're about to break down. And we think we're going into a deflationary period. But that's not all bad. Many people think, oh no, 08, 09, deflationary period, this is terrible. Sure. No. The deflation associated with technology, which is characterized by cost declines, being passed through to price declines, that deflationary is good deflation and causes booms in unit growth. Now, the other side of it, though, is creative destruction. The traditional world order is at risk. Anyone betting on the past is probably going to be making a mistake. Betting on the future, especially now, given these waves of technology, is the right thing to do. And so, again, thank you for your support, because you see the future.
Well,
go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, as I say, we've got about 15, amazing when you're having fun, 15 more minutes here on Live on Leap Day with Carson's Facts versus Feelings, joined by Cathie Wood. Cathie, thinking of a couple things, I want to thank you again. So you're doing this today. I don't even know if you know this yet, but in a couple of weeks, we're going to have you again, just meet with our Carson advisors, our Carson partners for a special call in a couple of weeks. So thank you for obviously being such a
pleasure,
great
of course,
partner. And I know they're going to be so excited to really pick your brain a little more in a couple of weeks. But I think it's a good segue, because it's going to come up. Bitcoin. I mean, it's in the news. Obviously, you've been a big proponent of Bitcoin. I don't even know where you want to take it, but just would you have a target on Bitcoin, or what are your thoughts as it cracks $60,000 here?
Yeah. A couple of things. This is talk about a revolution. Bitcoin is a monetary revolution. It's the first global, private, meaning no government oversight, decentralized, digital, and then most important, rules-based monetary system in history. It's a very big idea. And we think it's only begun. We gained our first exposure to Bitcoin in 2015 when it was $250. And I can tell you today at $60,000+, now that the SEC has given the green light to institutions, we have just begun. This is not only a monetary revolution, it is a new asset class. And the first new asset class since equities in the 1600s. So every institution has a fiduciary responsibility with a new asset class. Why? A new asset class tends to have low correlation of returns relative to other asset classes. Therefore, it is a diversifier, and therefore it increases returns per unit of risk. And every asset allocator, that's their goal. And if they miss one, they're probably going to lose in this game. So we think many institutions are looking very seriously at adding Bitcoin to their portfolios. And it is going to be one of the reasons, after all, there are only going to be not even 1.5 million new Bitcoin minted ever. Or would that be 1.5? It'd be, yes, 1.5 new million Bitcoin minted ever. That's a small supply. The supply relative to demand is going to push the price up, we think, quite significantly. We are in print in saying that this institutional push alone could add, I think it's in our Big Ideas 2024, could add $2.9 million per Bitcoin to the price. Now that's over by 2030, but someone asked me yesterday, do you think it'll hit 100,000 anytime soon? Absolutely. The institutional move in alone, we think, gets us there.
And it's just demand and supply dynamics, because supply is so constrained.
Mm-hmm.
Let me jump in one more here on this. So we talked about Bitcoin. You just rolled out, obviously, Bitcoin ETF. Ethereum's the second largest. I believe Solana's the third largest. Are you guys considering doing more ETFs, or maybe is it going to be the same way where like 11 of them come out on the same day with another big coin, or where does that stand?
Yeah, it's a good question, Ryan. So we have a filing in for a spot Ether ETF. Now, we already have futures ETFs out there. We have 5 different futures ETFs, in addition to ARKB, which is a spot Bitcoin. And so that's it with our partner, 21 shares. That number I gave you before for ETFs are non-crypto. That 8, you can add another 6 because of Bitcoin and all of these other futures. So we've got our filing in. The deadline, so we were the first in line for the spot Bitcoin ETF, and that's why the the deadline, the SEC did move it up to January 11th and approved all 11 on the same day. Just 2 of us are on the same day in May. And we hope, whereas BlackRock and Fidelity, their deadline is not until August, I believe. We are hoping that the SEC, we understand why all 11 for Bitcoin needed to be approved at the same time. And by the way, that's the global super financial highway, fees very low. We wanted to emphasize access opposed to anything else, so keep the fees very low. Now we think the business part of this begins, and we hope the SEC goes back to the old rules of the game. Those who file first are approved first. Instead of BlackRock and Fidelity, who have now the lion's share of the Bitcoin. And I'd like to say I'm very proud that we're number 3 behind them in terms of the non-GBTC. We now have $2 billion in our ETF, fastest ramp for any of our funds ever, of course, and one of the fastest in all of ETF history. So we hope that they're going to use our deadline as a timeline to make a decision. We have no idea. They haven't come back to us with questions yet, but they didn't come back to us with questions about Bitcoin, the spot Bitcoin, until 2 months until they approved it. So, we've got time. And, I've heard others say maybe it'll be approved by the end of the year. We do think it will be this year, though.
Is there something more special about Bitcoin over the other cryptocurrencies?
Yes, it's probably going to be the biggest. This idea of global monetary system and a completely new asset class. Mm-hmm. The monetary system is a very big idea. Whereas ETH, Solana, and we do have other portfolios in which we own them. We have extensive research on all of this evolving, and that we're going to be much more prolific so going forward. So if we're talking about decentralized financial services, DeFi, that's another big idea. We like to call that, and this is Chris Berniski, our first crypto analyst. He dubbed DeFi, which sounds defiant. He dubbed it as nothing more than the internet financial system. What does that mean? The developers of the internet in the early 90s did not put in a layer for payments. Nobody thought any financial activity would take place on the internet. And so they left it out. All we're doing now is putting it back in. Very simple. And it's going to take out a lot of middlemen, which populate the asset management business as a matter of fact. So it too is a big idea, not as big as Bitcoin. And Solana is doing similarly the same thing, lower cost, faster. There are trade-offs between the two. I think, Ether has a lot more, or Ethereum has a lot more layer 2 activity. Solana is more layer 1, so faster. And so there will be puts and takes for all of them, a place for all of them. I don't think there will be a place for 13,000 crypto assets out there. I think that will consolidate quite considerably.
No, it's fascinating to think about what's coming. Just want to change tracks here a little bit, and just pulling back about AI. I did look at your deck, the big ideas for 2024. That was fascinating. So much to think about. I highly recommend it to anyone. I'm sure you can find it on the ARC website. One slide in there, it showed how productivity of developers, software developers, improves 2x because of things like Copilot, GitHub's Copilot, all of that. And I'm curious, here from my friends too. I mean, I've always coded in my life, and as an engineer, in a former life, I should say, I still code. But do you think kids will need to learn to code anymore?
I think it's. I don't think they won't have to learn to code in the way you learn to code. AI will be doing most of. If you look at a company in our venture fund, Replit. It's a platform for developers. It has more than 25 million developers on it. How can this be in only a few years? There are only 25 million professional developers in the world. The reason is that these are not, for the most part, professional developers. These are people who speak natural language. We all do. And they go to Replit and basically put in what they want to say, I want to build a website like this. And it will take the programmers, we're all programmers now, a good way of the way there. And then what you need to take us all the way there are really good prompt engineers. How do I say something with such specificity that I get everything that I want? So it's pretty exciting. Our analyst built a website in an afternoon on Replit.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. No,
Yes.
it's very exciting to think about. I mean, you know,
Yes.
my daughter was asking me the other day, there's a coding class, I want to code. And that's what made me think about it. Like, does she need to learn to code ever?
Well, is she on Roblox? Is she on Roblox?
No, not yet. She's 7 years old. I should get her on that, maybe.
You should, because young people there don't even understand that they are programming when they build their little dress shop, right? And start doing business in it. So, yeah, yes, absolutely. Same idea.
We have 5 minutes. So this might be about the last question. You know, one of the really cool things working with Carson or working at Carson Group is we're pushing the boundaries a lot of different ways. One of them is with female leadership, women leadership. Terry Shepard is the president of Carson Group. Jessica Golson leads our research department. I can go on and on, but you know, we just opened up a women CEO fund also, which, like the name would suggest, invests in companies that are led by women. Obviously, Cathie is one of the most successful women in our industry. There's some little girl out there listening to this right now. What's some advice you can give, you know, being a female in finance, which, you know, can be interesting, I guess we'll just leave it at that. Some roadblocks you hit, some things you learned, just advice for any young women out there who want to be the next Cathie Wood.
Well, I want to encourage them, number one, because the world is our oyster. And the world's changing so rapidly, and it's so much fun, as I talked about, so energizing to be a part of the transformation of the world from a capital allocation point of view, pointing capital in the right direction. The second thing, as you get actually into a position, make sure you, young woman or young man, you know more about this new world than your boss does. You have one foot in it. Now, what you have to do is make your boss look brilliant. Make your boss look brilliant, and, you know, help bring some of these tools, with technology or otherwise, into your firm through your boss. Make him or her look brilliant. Keep your head down. Don't pay attention to the noise. Just keep focused on the prize. And if there's any way to do it, try and get into a situation where your performance can be measured. In a portfolio manager, you get measured every second, every minute, every day, every year, and so forth. Some people don't like that. But I think no one can take that performance away from you, for better or for worse, right? And there will be bad times. But over the long term, if you're doing the right thing, if you've pointed yourself and your company in the right direction, there are huge waves ahead, waves of productivity and waves of success.
Well, that was amazing. I mean, we've got like 2 more minutes. I mean, Cathie, I just want to give you the floor. I mean, I love it. We almost should end on that. That was amazing. But any final comments to wrap up this really fun discussion on Live with Leap Day on Carson's Facts versus Feelings? You've got 2 minutes. The floor is yours, Cathie.
Okay. Well, I love it that you covered the rapid growth that we will see, the ramifications for the stock markets, the equity markets around the world. Right now, disruptive innovation is valued in the public and private equity markets somewhere in the 19 to $20 trillion range. We believe that number in the next 7 years is going to 220 trillion. That's a 40% compound annual growth rate. So again, another way of saying to investors broadly, catch this wave. It's volatile, to be sure. Rebalance every once in a while, but make sure and get exposure to the wave, catch it, rebalance so that psychologically you can take the volatility, sell on the highs, buy on the lows, like we trade around stocks. And we think that innovation will be highly incremental to returns over time.
That's great. That's a great perspective.
Love it. I mean, listen, Cathie, this was awesome. We really appreciate you taking some time with us today. Definitely go check out the Hurricane. Get a crunchy group. And let me know what you think of it down in St. Pete Beach there. And we look forward again to speaking with you in a couple more weeks with our Carson partners. But thank you so much. This was amazing. So we're only halfway done. We've got a couple more hours, and I was drinking some of my milkshake. This chocolate milkshake. I'll tell you,
mine's here.
Yours is here. Okay, it's pretty good. So, Cathie, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Okay. See you soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye now. Bye.
So, Sonu, you said your milkshake's here?
I think my milkshake, I'm going to go get it.
You go get it. I'll talk for a second here. So that was awesome. We're going to play a promo here in a minute or two. Then we're going to be joined by Burt White. I assume Burt's there. I love what Cathie said about doing things make your boss look good. I was like, oh, that's good. We can talk that with Burt. But go ahead, guys, and play, I believe, the promo. Then I'm pretty sure Burt comes on after that.
Never have the opportunities to succeed been greater, nor the distractions to fail been more present. Advisors today face a uniquely complex challenge in wealth management. A challenge that starts with questions like, how can I manage the business while also growing in it? How do I deliver an incredible experience that my clients deserve while innovating to stay ahead of the competitive curve? How can I increase the value of my business and take care of the people who matter most, while building a legacy that extends beyond me? And how do I have a great time along the way? This is about a future where your purpose gets personal. What you'll experience today is not about us. It's about you and your story, your business, your clients, and your team. It's about understanding how we can support your growth with the resources, process, scale, and community to give you the freedom you need to build, maintain, and grow. This is not just a presentation, but a conversation between partners to help you find your freedom.
Carson's helped me find my freedom by just reinventing who we are. It's been a journey of just being a solo practitioner, going to an ensemble practice, and actually being able to look at the firm and the practice and my life and be able to do exactly what I want to do, not ever thinking about stepping away, but being able to continue to grow and help change other people's lives, both professionally and other advisors.
All right, Burt.
Hey.
Did you get a milkshake, Burt? Where's yours, Sonu? You have your milkshake?
Okay, I've got a story. I know Burt's here, but I got somebody else's order. Someone ordered a burger from Au Cheval, which is actually one of the best burger places in America. I'll put that up against anything else. That's what I got delivered. I haven't gotten my milkshake yet. That's going to come later, hopefully.
Cheval, that's nice. Yeah, man.
So far, so good. I can't say
Burt, thank you for joining us. We've got, let's see. We've got about 13 minutes, I believe. So, Burt, I think everyone likes to know titles. Go ahead and your title, sir. And what have you been up to today?
Yeah. Hey, guys. Been listening to you. That last episode was awesome. Yeah, really love that, and love that ending with Cathie. Like that comment to the young folks out there. I couldn't agree with more. They're changing the world, man. They're changing the world. But no, I've just been hanging around, man. My title, I don't even know.
I know.
So I'm the chief strategist here at Carson. I work closely with Ron, but really I run the day to day. And so everyone at Carson, sort of the team and everyone here kind of reports up through me. And then what I get to do is just sort of try to connect dots and think about how we can go and best serve our partners, and then all the many households that they serve. So that's my primary job. And you guys kicked me out of investments, which I'm still not happy about. At all.
Yeah, you
Right.
kind of opened the door.
Yeah.
Apologies, but I mean, Burt. So like, again, let's just dive right in because we've got about 10 minutes, give or take, here before we're joined by Libby Cantrell over at PIMCO to talk about some policy. We have a lot of advisors listening right now. I've had a lot of people texting me. People love what we've discussed. I mean, I've been at Carson 18 months. You're a little bit longer. I mean, you've got this big vision for where we're going. We're there, but where we continue to go. Just kind of, why would an advisor who's not with Carson, think about what we're doing over here and why they might want to join up, and just how excited are you about the future of this company?
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'll tell you, I don't regret the 30 years I worked at other places, and I was at two places for about 15 years each, and I love both of them. Great places, and I loved both of them. But I'll tell you, the world is shifting. The world is shifting to a sea of sameness. Everyone's out there saying, like, I've got 4 more ETFs than you do, and I've got 1 extra bell and whistle on my website than you have on your website, and like everything is the same. And the reason is, I think that it's forgot about what the currency that really matters is, because I think most firms really what they mostly view is they view partners and advisors as a bit of a transaction so that they can sell and grow and get the currency that matters most. And whether that's assets or AUM or get my publicly traded stock price higher. And I think that's where people feel. They feel that in their service. They feel that in the work that they get. And what I love about coming here is that this is a firm built by a single practitioner that has now become a firm that is a community of hundreds of practitioners that now run this. And that's what I love about it the most. We are a practitioner's firm. We were built by an advisor, Ron Carson, for advisors. And that's what we do all day long. It's the only thing we do all day long. And that's just, there's a purity to that. And there's a focus to that. And everyone can talk about how they know what it's like to serve advisors. But until you actually were the largest and then actually built a firm around you that insulates your happiness, which is what Ron did. Ron built a firm largely to insulate his happiness so he can do the 2 things he loves most. That's visiting with clients and visiting with partners and helping them grow through coaching. And that's what he did. And we can do the same for partners. And that's what we do all day long is partners come here and we figure out a way to insulate, build around their happiness so that they can do the things that they most love, whatever that is. And then we can help them with all the stuff in between and allow them to really love their business again. So that's why I'm most excited, Ryan.
I'll jump in, Sonu, just go in a second here. So, like, it's true. Like we say, find your freedom, right? That means a lot of things to a lot of people. I mean, Sonu and I brought this idea up, to the marketing team, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. And I thought this would be like, oh, let's just get a few people and do this. It turns out, Burt, to pull this off, it's a lot harder than I thought, but it's so amazing because the whole team just like jumped on. And there's so many people, behind the scenes right now. I mean, Sam and Chelsea, looking at you guys, I know there's more, but like so many people are helping us do this. It's like we're all on this one mission to do things. And we're Sonu and I are the research guys, yes, but just this company in general is all about pushing the boundary. I love to push the boundary of what can we do with social media, what can we do with compliance, and Carson lets you do these things. In fact, we're doing a live stream. Could you imagine doing a live stream at some other places? Let's just say the answer was no.
Absolutely.
We won't go there, huh?
Yeah, absolutely, dude. And that's what being a trailblazer is about. That's what being a visionary is about. That's what's doing things that you try to put yourself out there so that we can live in this adaptable, changing, innovative world. And so to do that, you got to have pioneers. And you're a pioneer. Both of you two are. Ron's a pioneer. I aspire to be one, right? And so, and that's what we're trying to drive. The advisors and the partners that really sit here at Carson, they want to be a part of that. The other thing that I would say, Ryan, that I discounted, and I bet you did too before you got here. When I was talking to folks before I came to Carson, I heard about this community, and I was like, oh yeah, I mean everyone has a community of stuff. No, until you get here, like you can't describe it, right? But just this feel. I mean, I heard a rumor, Sonu, that burger wasn't a mistake.
I just saw that. I was going to call that out. It's from Larry and Denise Sprung. Speaking about wonderful community and advisors. Thank you, Larry and Denise.
No,
Much, much
what'd you
appreciated.
send me? What'd they send me? I didn't get anything.
Nothing. Just
I
a
don't
box
need
of
it.
coal.
I've got to
I
go
think
straight.
maybe
I'm
I'll
all right.
Yeah. Lucky I didn't send it back or something. No, thank you, Larry, Denise.
That's
But
awesome.
Burt, goes back to you've been talking like this amazing community, and
That's what community is.
There
That's
you
what
go.
community is. And think about this. I was in a meeting yesterday with Ron, and we were talking about coaching. And think about what Ron did. Like, Ron was the largest, most successful advisor that was around. And then he decided to stop growing, and launch a coaching program that lost money to teach other people to be able to grow. Just think about that for just a second. And just, he did that, and he just derailed to some degree his own growth. And the number of folks that have gone through that, thousands and thousands today still, but over the years, Ron has had a bigger fingerprint on more advisors, whether it be reading his book, Testing the Trenches, or whether it be in the coaching program or being here as Burt. And my point on that is, I asked Ron, like, what were you thinking? And was really excited. He said, number one, the ability to give back, because I realized that if this world needs and deserves financial advice. Every single human on this planet deserves it. But secondly was the community. That was the genesis of the community, because it wasn't me that was coaching them. It was the coaching community that coached each other. And the whole beauty of the coaching community was that 2/3 of the ideas that I came up with were ideas that everyone else had, and then we had to share them. That's what community is about. And a community is about taking care of each other, like burgers for Sonu when he's working hard. But community is also about sharing ideas. I mean, we just heard something that happened the other day where two of our partners partnered up to close this really massive $100 million client. And there wasn't one partner that said, gosh, I think I could do this myself. It was sort of this community that came together to best serve this particular client. And that happens all the time here. And that's the kind of exciting part, y'all, of just sort of lifting all boats and making each other better. And then your expertise is a big part of that. I mean, just think about this. Ryan, when I came, and Sonu, you were here, what we said was that we were going to shift our investment platform to be innovative and to really be about delivering thought leadership to people, and doing so because that's what people are starving for now. They want that level of thought leadership and interaction. And man, between our planning group and our compliance team and our investment team and our marketing org and the coaching org and Ron, that's what this firm's built on, is expertise and being a part of that in our community. Yeah.
No, I must say, just from my part, I know probably for Ryan too, it's been a blast. So it's been a lot of fun, and we're enjoying what you're doing too, right? But one thing, Burt, over the last year, you give amazing talks. I think one theme has been we are moving towards a world of, convenience, and where time is a precious commodity, right? Time is maybe our most precious commodity. And talk about how the financial industry and even Carson is moving towards that, like if you think about where the puck is going, how we are moving towards that goal, giving people more convenience and giving them more time, really.
Yeah, totally. Well, look, the reality is it's really all that matters. Okay, we're given an hourglass, and the sand starts going as soon as we're born, and we have no idea how much sand is in it. No idea. We have no clue. Now, we could be on my last grain right now. I don't know. Like, no one knows. And time isn't to be spent; it's to be invested. That's what it is. And the question is, how are you investing it? I said this at the beginning. One of the things that Ron really did well, and I think what we have in practice here, is about helping to insulate what partners love and the stuff that they don't love. Almost everything that I have when I talk to a partner about thinking about coming to Carson, they say the same thing. I don't love my business as much as I did a year ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I don't love it as much as I did. And I'd love to be able to do that because I'm doing stuff I don't want to do, and it's gotten complex. And the reality is that element of time, that's what you give back. It's not just giving time back, but it's giving back this love and this help and this happiness. And the way the world's doing that, that's how we're doing it. But the way the world's doing that is that no longer is good service good enough anymore. What we want is convenience. Okay. I don't want to go and spend 4 hours at a fancy meal with, white gloves. And like, I want to have the best burger in all of America delivered to my house. That's what I want. And so the reality is, how do you apply that now to every part of your life, including your financial world, your health, your wealth, and everything like that? And that is really where the whole world is headed. And it is a world of convenience. And the firms that are winning are doing that. Cathie talked about that. A big part of that is tech. A big part of that is using data to be able to serve up and deliver solutions and value and results in context, in time, anywhere, anytime. And that's what it's all about. The last thing on this, Sonu, is, I've been saying for a long, long, long time, look, innovation has been around us forever, but it's never been about the machines. It's been about what the machines enable humans to do. And if the machines are actually stressing you out and not making you love your business more, then you've got the wrong machines. You're doing it wrong, because it never was about the machines. It's about making you better, right? It's about making you live your best life, finding your freedom. And that's what we really want to do. Let's don't make this about the machines. Let's make this about what the machines make us do, and the more value and the more love and the more impact that we can have in this world.
Love that.
Burt, this was great. We're almost top of the hour. We have to get Libby on here, but I know you can't say no. Somebody's listening. Let's do this again. But how about you come on Facts versus Feelings? We do this for about an hour sometimes. Does that sound okay? You can't say no, right?
Love it, my friend. I would be honored.
Looks like you're in Omaha right now. That's what it looks like, right? You know,
I am in Omaha, living life. Love it.
There we go. We'll have a great day, Burt. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being such a steward of letting the research team kind of grow and do our thing. And I think it's working. And we know you're only a phone call or text away, and we appreciate that. But we're having a lot of fun. So thank you, Burt. Appreciate it.
Only compliant texting. Only.
Oh, that's true. I didn't say that out loud. You're right. Sorry. You're right.
Hey, really appreciate you guys. Thanks. See ya.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, that was awesome. That was Burt there. So you get your burger out, buddy. Get that burger. Start eating your hamburger, man.
I got it.
Okay. So we are.
I must say it smells amazing. So
Libby is here. Intro. Okay. Yeah. I think we're good. So let's go ahead.
Are we doing on time?
Libby intro. Let's keep this thing. We're on time, Sonu. We're doing good so far. Let's play the intro, guys. Thank you.
All right.
There's Libby. Hello, Libby. How you doing?
Our favorite guest.
I'm honored. Nice to be here. Happy Leap Day.
Yes, I will say this. You are officially right now the first 3-time guest on Facts versus Feelings. How does it feel? I mean, is that like the biggest honor of your career?
Great. I mean, definitely the apex. It's only going to go downhill from here.
Well, it is an election year. It might go downhill. That's a good point. So let's do our titles real fast. Keep everyone happy here. Ryan Detrick, Chief Market Strategist. Sonu
Varghese, Vice President, Global Macro Strategist.
Then Libby, your title and a little bit about what you do all day. Some people know you by now, but some out there might not.
Yeah, so like many people, I wear many hats at PIMCO, but my title is Head of U.S. Public Policy, and it sort of depends. It varies depending on the day, but in any day, I may be helping to coordinate engagement with folks down in Washington, policymakers in Washington on behalf of the firm. I help our investment committee think through political and policy risk, and then I also help our sector desks think through different risks in terms of their sector that may be coming out of Washington. And then I get the opportunity to meet with clients a lot, like you all. So I'm very happy to be sharing our Leap Day with you.
Well, thank you for that. It seems like every time we have you on, we are on the verge of a shutdown, and we plan this thing, a government shutdown, and then you come on and the shutdown's averted. There's no shutdown. So.
I mean, it's magic. Yes, exactly.
That's the way it works.
Yeah, so I think actually, Sonu, the market is now, to your point, so inured to the shutdown risk that it doesn't really mean very much. But if you do care, a government shutdown has been averted yet again. And actually, I think in a more substantive way, it looks like Congress is en route to pass at least half of the funding bills that they need to pass through the end of fiscal year 2024. So this is not only a stopgap, this actually is a little bit more substantive. I think the big question is March 22nd, which is going to be one of the new deadlines for the rest of the government, and whether Speaker Johnson is able to sort of navigate yet another group of funding bills through his rather diverse caucus, shall we
put it mildly? And
yeah, and I think that, for folks who are listening to you all and for our investors and for our trade floor, I mean, a shutdown really doesn't make all that much of a difference from a market's perspective, as long as it's not a prolonged shutdown, as long as it's not a full government shutdown for weeks, if not longer. And that risk looks like it's almost completely mitigated at this point. So again, in terms of the markets, they shouldn't necessarily care about this. If they did, but they should especially not care about it now that there is this compromise that looks like it's going to pass.
So let me jump in just for a second here. I should have said this earlier. Just give me 30 seconds here. We are asking for some donations. If you're enjoying this Leap Day that we're doing live on Leap Day with Carson's Facts versus Feelings, feel free to put that up, guys. It's events.stjude.org/Leap Day for some donations there. We're trying to raise some money for a good cause to help some people who really could use the help there with donations. So Libby, let's get into. Let's just start with it, right? Let's get right to it. Are the two nominees set? I mean, is it Biden versus Trump? Is that what it's going to be?
Will they be the same nominees when we are talking about this in September?
True.
I don't know if her audio went away.
Nope. Did we lose Libby?
Hopefully not. You can hear me, right?
I hear you just fine, Sonu. Yeah, Libby.
I can hear you too.
She can hear us. We lost her.
Yep. But she'll come back. I mean,
Libby, can you hear us? No, doesn't sound like it. Well, wonder what she would have said if she were to answer this.
Yes. I mean, it's funny you're talking about a shutdown, and every time you have heard a shutdown, it's like, oh yeah, Congress achieved a lot, right? And passing a budget is just like Congress's number one job to do. Right? Mm-hmm. They haven't been able to do it. It's just ironic that it's taken. It's like I said, it's as if it's a big achievement just to get a continuing resolution, which is essentially a temporary stopgap. But hopefully, as Libby said, you'll get a budget, and that will take us through the end of the election and all of that.
So Chelsea said, "Can you hear us?" Chelsea, I don't hear you. I hear Sonu, but if you're talking,
right,
I don't hear you. What's going on today here? Well. So Chelsea, we can't hear you. If that's what you're asking, I just hear Sonu. I don't know.
I think she was thinking about Libby.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Oh, because Libby can see this too. Apologies. Yeah, clearly something. Okay, there's tech. It's okay. Hopefully we're going to figure this out. What's going on? It worked. I mean, it worked fine for the first 5 minutes.
I see a friend Ian from PIMCO as well is helping out. Thank you. And
okay, that's all right. I mean, so let's see. I mean, we talked about this a little bit ago, but markets. We're going to talk a lot about the economy, but the inflation data this morning, Sonu. What'd you think about it?
Yeah, I think as expected, just before Cathie came on, I was thinking about the fact that, I mean, it gets to inflation. The inflation number for January came in hot. I think, you and I have talked before on Facts versus Feelings about January price effects, things like that, shelter inflation being a little hot, core services especially. There's a lot of weird things in core services, like financial services, how much you're paying for services from the bank, and financial advisory services, which go up when the stock market is up too, right? So a lot of weird little things in PC, but it gets to look, market's already pricing that. They knew that after CPI data came in, PPI data, and knew that, okay, core PC is going to be 0.4%. But here's the other thing, I think less talked about number that came out today was actually real incomes. Real incomes are growing about 4%, Ryan. And that's
Libby, we see you. Can you hear us, Libby?
Yeah. I don't know what happened. I mean, maybe we should take donations for our IT department here. Sorry about that.
I saw Ian helping you. Shout out to Ian too.
Yeah. So. Ian, did Ian save the day there? Was that Ian?
I mean, he did. He was crawling under my desk and doing something with my computer. So we're all good. Sorry about that.
Well, I believe where we were, I'll just start over, but we said, we're pretty sure, I guess it's going to be Biden versus Trump, but is it going to be that way in September or October? Of course, no one has a crystal ball, but what are your thoughts on, who's truly going to be running for presidency here, in, I don't know, what is it, 5-6 months?
Yeah. So, what we've been telling clients is that it is not 1968, but it might be 1892. And what I mean by that is that, it is not 1968 because I think one of the main questions our clients have been asking, will Biden actually be the nominee? Or will we see what happened in 1968, if you might remember from your civics courses, is that Lyndon B. Johnson, who was the incumbent president at the time, facing headwinds in the polls and a difficult situation in Vietnam, dropped out in March of 1968. It will be not. It's not 1968. As long as Biden is breathing, he is running. That is a quote from former Senator Breaux, who served in the Senate with him for many years. Our discussions with Biden World indicate that he is running. He will be the nominee. Now, if he's not breathing, then it means that Kamala Harris likely will have ascended to the presidency, and then she goes into the convention in August as the likely nominee. So it will be, with really high conviction, President Biden on that ticket, and if not, it's Kamala Harris. Now, what do I mean by 1892? Guys, do you know who the president was in 1892? Oh. No. Grover Cleveland. No. So Grover Cleveland, of course, is the only president who has served, has only served the non-consecutive terms in U.S. history. He was the 22nd president and the 24th president. And he lost a bid in 1888, ended up running again and was the nominee in 1892. And the reason I say it is 1892 is because Donald Trump will be the nominee. So here you go. It's not 1968. Biden's going to be the nominee, but it might be like 1892.
I'm kind of glad you said it won't be 1968 because that was a year when the Democrats had their national convention in Chicago and it didn't go pretty. And this year, again, it's going to be in Chicago. So hopefully it's not
Chicago again. And I actually think that's that's actually a super important point. One of the reasons why the Democrats are clinching to Biden is because they do not want a repeat of the convention in 1968. Now, of course, it's very different. Then the Democratic Party had much more power than the party does now and what have you. But they do not want a repeat. They're okay with a location repeat, but not necessarily with the events of the convention repeating themselves.
Speaking of, just to stay on that, right? Like the Democratic National Convention is in Chicago. I think the Republican one is in Milwaukee for obvious reasons, I think, because Wisconsin is so important. Does this election just come to essentially Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin?
Yeah, so those three states are going to be critical. I would also add Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia.
Sure.
So if you're looking at, and lots of our clients ping us about polling and what have you, if you're looking at polling, I would just say the national polling is kind of garbage at this point. Polling error is always very high this early in the cycle. Now, arguably, it might be a little bit lower this cycle because we know these two gentlemen very well. Like people are not learning new things about Donald Trump or Joe Biden. But still, the polling error is usually, it passes prologue very high at this point in the cycle. State polling still has a lot of error this early. It's a little bit more reliable. But what I would say to folks who are listening,
I think
we lost her again. We lost her again. It's weird. Okay, that's all right. They'll fix it there. Okay. Yeah.
Mark, I would say, speaking of elections, right? You've done a lot of work on elections. What's the prognostication like with respect to markets and election years? How does it look?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's an election year, obviously. And when you have a president up for re-election, I was wanting to ask Libby about this actually. A president up for re-election first term, the last 10 times, this is going back to the early 50s, Sonu, the S&P has been higher for the year, up like 12.2% average. When you have a lame duck president,
okay,
stock market's down on average. Now, yes, there's 2000 in there, 2008, tech bubble, financial crisis. Would that really have changed because it's an election year? Maybe not. Let's be honest. 1960 wasn't that great either, but still, it makes sense. You can pull certain levers, try to get reelected, and I think that makes some sense. And if you think about it too, I mean, we knew a year ago the pre-election year is usually strong, but it's pre-election year of a first-term president that things will be better, up 20% on average. So, these things have played out. And I will also point this out. First quarter of an election year is usually not that great. First quarter after a 20% gain, like we saw last year, usually not that great. This year, it is what it is. Coming out swinging. I mean, we're going to have a darn good
7% or something.
What's that?
We're up 7%, like S&P 500 year to date, like 2 months.
Yes, yes, and we're looking at a huge gain in February, and that's usually not all that great of a month. So I think I talked about this in our just the Facts versus Feelings podcast we released yesterday. Just when the market's doing things it usually normally doesn't do, that's when I've got big ears. I mean, look at these ears. I don't miss any of these ears. My ears perk up when I see things. That's even like more bullish. I mean, I wouldn't have been shocked at all if we had a little seasonal weakness. And I still think it's possible. My goodness gracious. After we're up 4 months in a row, one of these, that's assuming we're finished higher in February. One of these months we're going to be down. But Sonu, I look when you're up in November, December, January, and February, those 4 months, like we're likely going to be. That next calendar year, so that'd be 2024, has been higher. You ready for this? 14 in the last 14 times. 14 out of 14, like a 21 or 22% average return for the calendar year. Yeah, you're cheating a little bit because you're up those previous first 2 months, but still a positive development there. Let's just read just give us 1 second, the private chat. Guys, any update or we'll just keep talking? We're
I don't think yet. Oh,
okay, there we go.
They changed location.
Oh, there we go.
I am now. Just a second. I'm sorry. I'm now.
It's all right.
I'm not sure where the camera is, but
we see you. Yeah, you're it's fine. We did this with Dan Ives about 2 hours ago. Dan Ives was literally Libby. In case you didn't catch earlier, it's fine. He was in Bangkok from like a taxi. Okay, so we're just on the fly today.
This is yes. This is all very real time. All good.
There we go.
Yes, the joys of doing this live. So, yeah.
So, honestly, where were we, Sonu, when we stopped there?
We were, I think polling. We were talking about polling. Oh, Libby was talking about polling, not the disconnect between. It's too early to take the polls at face value, basically.
Yeah. So it is. So I'm sorry. I'm not even. I think I'm right there.
You're centered good now. Yeah, go ahead.
Good. Yep. Okay. I have like 4 IT people in my office. So
yeah.
Okay. So I would just say ignore the polls to the extent that you're looking at them. But as we get closer to the election, really the state polling in those 6 states, and again, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Nevada are the most important. So. And we could see Ohio, North Carolina, but I think it's going to really come down to those 6. So in terms of, what to pay attention to, polling in those 6 states. But as we get closer to the election, again, the polling right now is really unreliable.
One thing with polling is that, I think we've shared notes of this before that, Democrats have outperformed recently, like in the 2022 midterms and special elections as well, despite, at least surprising to me, extremely low approval ratings for the president. So I was like, what's going on there?
Yeah, and I honestly think this is one of the reasons why Joe Biden decided to run again, is because if you remember, Democrats did much better than they were expected to in the midterm elections, much better than they should have if you looked at the economic data or all these other things. And I think he, took that as a referendum and on his own performance. And it may have been, but Sonu, what I really think it was the Dobbs decision in the previous June of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. And what we've seen sort of since then is that in these special elections, particularly when abortion rights are on the ballot, Democrats have done much better than they should have, what their partisan baseline would have indicated. This is the same thing that actually happened here in New York recently with Tom Suozzi winning back George Santos' seat. So I wouldn't put too much stock in special elections as it relates to general elections, but this issue is going to be really salient. And I would say it's a vulnerability for Donald Trump. Biden has a lot of vulnerabilities, but Donald Trump, this is definitely going to be a vulnerability for Republicans.
Go ahead.
So we were when we lost it for a minute there, Libby. We were just talking about the idea of how markets usually do pretty well. Stock market investors do pretty well of an election year in general, but even better when it's a president up for re-election, a first-term president. Like my data said, the last 10 first-term presidents, stock market, the last 10 first-term presidents, stock market was higher by like the 1950s. Is that random, or is it true they can push certain buttons, pull certain levers to get people in a better mood, get the stock market up? Where do you kind of side with that?
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting, right? Especially compared to when it's an open race, the stock market does much worse, or it doesn't do as well when there is an incumbent president running for re-election. I do think some of this is just kind of coincidence, and so not necessarily causation. But to the extent there is causation, it is about this idea of like priming the pump, right? Of getting some fiscal stimulus in an election year. So to your point, people feel good. And when they go to the polls, they want to re-elect the president. I would say a lot of that depends on the composition of Congress as well. So if you remember, of course, the power of the purse resides with Congress. And as much as folks are focused on the run for the White House, I would argue you should be just as focused on the composition of Congress, because, of course, they're the ones who are driving fiscal policy, tax cuts, government spending, and what have you. This year, we may see a tax bill. I've been pretty skeptical that we would see any stimulus, because why would Republicans in the House want to help Joe Biden? But they did pass by a big bipartisan margin.
In the Senate, right?
Disproportionate. Sorry?
In the Senate, right?
They passed that actually in the House. They passed
in the House.
They passed a bill that would reinstate the R&D tax credit, the ability for companies to expense R&D expenditures in the year that they happened and what have you. It's running into some roadblocks, Sonu, in the Senate, though. And you just saw the ranking member, Chairman Crapo, come out against it yesterday. So we'll sort of see, but I think our expectation is minimal, if any, fiscal stimulus coming from Washington this year. So we'll see, Ryan, how that sort of plays through to the markets, the risk markets at least.
Understood. So just way off subject, because that's how this podcast can go. I also had some food delivered. Larry Sprung, thank you, Larry. He knew Sonu and I are working through our lunch, and Denise also to thank you. So
thank you,
I'll eat
Larry.
this. We got a little bit of a break here in a minute or two, so I absolutely will dive in because I am a little hungry there. So thank you so much for that. So Libby, since we're off track a little bit, let's bring this back. We've talked to you multiple times about your son, who I forget how old he is, and inform us there, but he's been in student council. Not that he's kind of got, a little cheat sheet wouldn't have given what his mom does, but how is student council going for your son?
That's Teddy. Yes, Teddy is 12.
Teddy.
He's in 6th grade. Okay. Thank you so much for remembering. Yep. So Ryan, he actually had he made a political calculus this year. He had the opportunity to run for the secretary as a 6th grade member. He decided, though, to continue to run as a House rep, because he wanted to stay close to the people. He did not feel like the secretary position would be like, he would be the man of the people. He couldn't bring them his fellow classmates donuts. So I think he's really greasing the wheels here for a presidential run in 8th grade. So
learning.
Fingers crossed.
Exciting. Very good.
Speaking, just going to the I want to talk fiscal policy in a bit, but just real quick, because the Fed has been such a big factor in markets and all of that. Does the election matter for the Fed, especially with respect to moving ahead with rate cuts? I mean, is that a factor at all in their calculus?
Yeah. So it's interesting because, of course, we especially when Fed Chair Powell gave that sort of surprisingly dovish press conference, sort of the pivot in December, there was a lot of narrative about, is he doing this to help Joe Biden and his reelection bid? Janet Yellen, the Secretary of the Treasury, had just been talking about the high interest expense on the U.S. debt. So there was a lot of, I think, chatter, even internally, about sort of the political motivations of Powell. I would say, and we have the benefit of having Rich Clarida, who's the vice chair of the Fed here at PIMCO, back at PIMCO, and he corroborates this, that the Fed is really going to be impervious to the election cycle, just in general. If you actually look at going back to the 1980 election cycles, the Fed has either cut or raised rates at every cycle except for in 2012, when actually they used their balance sheet to do SMQE. So they're not afraid to move, right? Either way. Now, if you look at the Taylor rule would suggest that sometimes they should have probably hiked more than they did in an election year. But the cutting is actually, they're very willing to cut in an election year. So I think we should assume this year that is going to be the case, that Powell is impervious to these election cycle, these sort of political dynamics. And if anything, I actually think he is so focused on the legacy of the Fed, his own legacy, but the legacy of the Fed as being an independent, nonpartisan institution, then I think that will be even more true this year. I mean, of course, remember, his term lasts until May of 2026. We get a lot of questions from clients about this. Like, will Powell be fired on day one if Trump is, and actually, like, Trump can't do that. He actually doesn't have the power to do that. Now,
does he know that? Is he aware of that?
Details. But, you know, so he may try, but in terms of actually being able to effectuate that, he will likely not be able to do that. So I'll say that, like, even more so, Powell's going to be sort of impervious to this because he has job security through, you know, May of 2026. He probably doesn't want to be chairman again. So he's, again, more focused on the legacy of the Fed and his own legacy.
So this is, again, live on Leap Day with Carson's Facts versus Feelings. We're joined by Libby Cantrell over at PIMCO. We've hit the halfway point. I've had some food delivered. I'm drinking a milkshake. Libby's in a new room. I mean, this is what happens when stuff's live.
It's the hour.
Yes.
You mentioned Rich Clarita, and I was poking around looking for some stuff to ask you, and you and Rich wrote a blog together. I don't know if it means one of you wrote it. Both your names are on it. I understand how that can go sometimes, but the blog was done in February, so this month, talking about the massive deficits. Does it matter? Does it not matter? Where does it go with interest rates? I mean, these are questions every time I present the deficit, the government spending. I mean, believe me, you get asked this all the time too. Where does PIMCO lie, and how much we should care, not care, deficits, interest rates? Where does it all go?
So I do think it's sort of a nuanced answer here. We should definitely care. Like, the long-term debt sustainability question is a really relevant question, and our clients are asking us as well. In the short term, however, I'm not sure it really matters for markets. I think there was, some time in the last fall where people thought that the bond vigilantes who had been basically asleep had finally woken up. But again, then Powell did his pivot, and that the term premium sort of collapsed very quickly. Do we think it's, again, will it be a headwind in the future over the long term? Sure. But as long as the dollar is the reserve currency, there will continue to be a bid for U.S. Treasuries. Now, that's something that politicians should necessarily take for granted. But at least for the short term, they probably are. And that's why you're going to see continued deficit spending. I mean, this is the irony, Ryan, that all of these sort of fiscal fights that we've seen in Washington about either the debt limit or about the government funding. I mean, they're really just proposing to nibble at the edges. If you really wanted to do something about the U.S. debt problem, you have to fix Medicare and Social Security. And those things have become the third rail in politics. And as a result, and of course, both nominees or likely nominees have taken any reform off the table. Both Biden and Trump have said that they will not touch either Social Security or Medicare. So, again, I just think this is for now probably not going to be a serious issue, but longer term, 5 years out, once apparently, especially when Social Security actually starts, paying out more than it takes in, it will likely kind of become front of mind for a lot of folks.
So I'll jump in just for a minute, and Sonu, go ahead and go next here. But I've pointed this out. I'm kind of in the same lines. We're in the same lines as where you guys were 4 years ago, like right now, right? That's when the pandemic really started to just grip the world. Stock market in U.S. was crushed. Go look this up. Bond market was hit hard in March of 2020, and even gold sold off. About the only thing that went up in March of 2020 was the U.S. dollar, the cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry. It was a reminder to us and everybody else. We still, maybe it's not perfect. We got deficits. We got problems. We get it. We still had the world's reserve currency. In 2022, the first 10 months of 2022, when the stock market's down 25%, bonds were down 20%, give or take, at least treasuries. What was the dollar doing? It was having one of its largest 10-month rallies ever. So I think as long as we still have the world's reserve currency, I'm with you. I don't like debt. I don't like having a bunch of debt. I mean, believe me, but it's kind of like, you know what? If the balance sheets of consumers are still strong, and we've talked about that a lot in our podcast lately, we're going to get into it. We think they are. And balance sheets of corporate America strong. That matters more for the economy and honestly for the stock market than the debt of our country. Do you kind of agree there, Libby? Anything else you want to add? Then Sonu, feel free to
I would just say, and this is like not the most politically correct quote, but Larry Summers.
This is not the most politically correct podcast. It's all right.
And I will quote him. And actually, you're quoting our founder, Bill Gross, when he used to say, the U.S. dollar is sort of the cleanest dirty shirt. Like, got a closet of dirty shirts, you're going to pick out the one that's like less dirty. But, Larry Summers said, like, what is the alternative to the dollar? In Europe, in the euro, Europe is a museum. The yen in Japan is a nursing home. And in China, the RMB, China is a prison. So, I'm quoting our former Treasury Secretary, but it is, when you think about it, like in terms of the developed markets, there really is no alternative. Now, we are seeing some, central banks and sovereign wealth funds diversify away from the dollar very incrementally. But in terms of what you're saying, in terms of like the flight to quality, and also the very unique aspects and characteristics of our economy, the dynamism of our labor force, immigration, which has become weaponized, but as we've seen over the last year, has actually really helped on the supply side from a labor force participation perspective and what have you. It still reigns supreme. And then, of course, the U.S. consumer, we like to buy stuff. So,
yes.
And just coming to that as well. Like, it seems like the path of least resistance is always going to be more spending. Politicians, I imagine, know which side the bread is buttered, right? I mean, so to speak. And like you have some great decks, and I was looking at that deck that Ian had shared with us, and one slide had everyone wants the deficit to be cut, right? Like nobody wants all this debt. But then you ask them, okay, what should we do about it? Going to something you mentioned, cut Medicare? No, don't do that. Cut Social Security? Nope, don't do that. So obviously politicians are not going to do that. But coming to fiscal policy and more spending, we have like a fairly large fiscal cliff coming up at the end of 2025, right? Because the individual tax cuts, even though they weren't the big part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act 2017, I think. All right, but it was a corporate tax cuts that was the big part of that. But individual tax cuts were a piece of that. Those tax brackets are going to go back up at the end of 2025. What happens? What's it? I can't imagine any of the politicians will say, you know what, we are going to make taxes go up.
Yeah, so it's exactly right. So it's about $4 trillion in total. Okay. That is set to expire at the end of 2025. And you're right, the corporate tax changes, for the most part, that were made under that legislation are permanent. So those don't revert, but it's on the personal side. So the personal tax brackets, the SALT deduction decreases. Actually, the SALT deduction, ironically, gets reinstated. So for those of us,
yes, it's
high,
how all this works.
High state taxes, we would love to see that. That is not likely to happen. But so if Congress doesn't do anything, all of that reverts. And that is a massive, as you said, fiscal cliff. It's a massive tax hike. And as a result, Congress will do something about it. This is really, though, where it comes down to who's in the White House, but also the composition of Congress. Because if you have a Republican Congress with Trump in the White House, all of those tax cuts will be extended. Now, I think the big question is, will they be paid for at all? Trump could reverse some of the Inflation Reduction Act on the electric vehicle credit. I think is going to be kind of on the chopping block in that sort of scenario. But outside of that, he probably doesn't pay for them. Again, he doesn't really care about deficits. The market doesn't seem to care about deficits. And I think the other extreme is if you have a Democratic Congress with Joe Biden in the White House, then what will you see? Well, you'll see probably an extension of like half of those tax cuts. So in either kind of extreme, United Republican Congress, United Republican Washington, or United Democratic Washington, you're going to see an extension of at least some of those. The question really is on those top brackets and some of the things that are for, folks who are high income earners, whether those, tax provisions get extended or not. And I think that just depends on, again, the composition of Congress.
And so I would expect the deficit to go up, basically.
The deficit's going up. That's the thing. Like the big loser under both Joe Biden and Donald Trump is the U.S. deficit.
Well, So I want to jump in on something there because you mentioned the makeup of Congress, right? As far as I understand it, Republicans have the smallest majority in the House in like 140 years, and the Democrats are 51 to 49 in the Senate. I believe those numbers are accurate. You can confirm
That's
that,
right.
but it's pretty
That's
close.
right.
It's pretty close to gridlock, okay?
Yep.
So what I hear, and I want you to walk us through, like, assuming we don't know anything, because I honestly don't like politics that much. I'll be honest. I do it for a day job. They say the path for the Republicans in the Senate is easier to like gain more seats because there's not as many seats up for Republicans versus Democrats. My head explodes when I hear that. But can you walk us through kind of what that means to us this coming November?
Yeah, and it is confusing, right? So just as a reminder, 435 members in the House, every single seat is up for re-election this election cycle. Those seats are up for every 2 years. The Senate, 100 members in the Senate, but only a third of those seats are up every 2 years. So this year it happens to be 34 seats are up for re-election. Of those 34, Democrats are defending 23 of them.
Wow.
So when you've heard, people sort of say the Senate Democrats have a bad map, they really do have a bad map in terms of the sheer number of Senate seats that are there defending. But then also, if you unpack which states are actually in those where those seats are, they're in states like West Virginia, very Republican, Montana, very Republican, Ohio, pretty Republican. And so they're not only defending a lot of seats, but they're also defending really vulnerable seats. And so I think it's fair to say that under the best of nights, Democrats are looking at a 50-50 Senate. And then they would have, under the best night scenario for them, Joe Biden in the White House and Kamala Harris, once again, is sort of the tiebreaker. But I think that conventional wisdom, and I would agree with it here, is that very likely Republicans are able to flip the Senate to Republican control. It's not going to be certainly by a 60 vote margin, which they need for a filibuster proof vote. But it could be 1 seat, 2 seats. It will likely be a narrow majority again, but probably going to be under Republican control. So that is and I think that's helpful actually for the markets when they're thinking about election scenarios. The sort of having a split Congress under Joe Biden is one of the likely election scenarios. The other one is obviously a split Congress under Trump and then under a Republican Congress under Trump. The idea of a Democratic sweep, it's possible, and who knows, right? We're 7 months before the election, but probably unlikely at this point.
So one more from me, and then Sonu jump in. So if we're saying the Republicans might take the Senate, are we saying Democrats might take the House? So just kind of be a flip flop? Is that what you think could be potentially on the card here?
That's certainly possible. And again, as you point out, Ryan, Republicans control the House by 2 seats right now.
Right.
It is this crazy narrow majority. And say what you will about Speaker Johnson, he is talk about
constraints, huh?
trying to herd monkeys. It is definitely or herd cats or what have you, whatever metaphor you want to use. And so they have only a 2-seat majority. If you sort of have the same analysis in the House, how many vulnerable districts are Republicans or Democrats defending? Right now, arguably, Republicans are defending many more vulnerable districts than Democrats. So they're defending 17 districts in which Biden won, whereas Democrats are only defending 5 districts in which Trump won. So the House could flip to Democratic control. Again, if Republicans have a great night, you could easily see a united Republican Congress. But it is much more likely that Democrats win control of the House than honestly they keep control of the Senate at this point.
Got it.
Got it.
I want to think broadly thinking about connecting policy to the macroeconomy and then markets too. If you think about GDP growth, especially real GDP growth, it's basically productivity plus labor force growth. And I think 2 of our previous guests, Dan Ives and Cathie, made a really strong case for the productivity growth piece of it. In fact, much out of both of them, I think were way out of consensus. The productivity growth will be much higher. I think ARC's productivity growth will probably translate to about 6% or so. So,
yeah.
Live in that world.
But let's talk about the other side of it, the labor force growth piece of it, because a lot of that depends on policy. But we are an aging society. There's demographics, right? And so labor force growth, if it comes, I think the U.S. has, immigration going for it. And to your point, you mentioned this a little while ago, saying that immigration has been a big part of why labor supply has increased over the last 2 years, right? That constraint is sort of eased because of, higher immigration numbers. What's the prognosis going forward post-election on that side of things?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting and it's been difficult, I think, for Biden particularly to lean in at this point, because a lot of that labor force participation seems to be coming from folks who are coming over the border. At least some of it is. They're getting what's called temporary protected status. They also have the ability to get work visas. So some of that is coming from that labor force pool, or that pool of folks. Immigration is really kind of pro markets, pro economy. You would want to have an immigration policy. Honestly, we're attracting kind of the best of the best. So expanding, say, our H-1B visa program, which goes to high-skilled immigrants, and just being more surgical about the way that we're thinking about immigration, increasing one pool and maybe having higher standards in another pool. Unfortunately, our immigration system, and this is a very bipartisan view, is broken. Both sides of the aisle think it's broken. Sadly, though, it's just been very difficult to have kind of the political appetite on really either side of the aisle to really tackle it in a fulsome way. So unfortunately, I do think inertia here may be the main kind of force, with the exception that what's happening at the southern border has become a big liability for Biden going into the election, but it's also just become a big political issue. So you could see a bill that does sort of address what's going on at the southern border, and then maybe you have, you're opening the spigots in some of these H-1B programs and what have you. But again, it's a really easy issue to demagogue, unfortunately, for politicians. But it's a really important, obviously, force for economic growth and sort of for the future of the United States, if you think about it, just given the demographic cliff that we are likely facing for the next, decade or two.
I can attest to that piece of it. It took me 14 years, but I just finished a 10-year anniversary of being a U.S. citizen 10 days ago. So.
Oh, good. Well, congratulations. Hopefully that's still a good thing.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I wouldn't have it any other way. I love this country. Yeah.
Well, I have bad news. We only have 5 minutes left, so we need to kind of get to it. I mean, one of the things I love to ask Libby, and I know I probably asked you this last time, but let's do it again. Like mentors, like people that you've learned from, or maybe just some advice for someone out there who's listening to this who wants to get into kind of your world of working at a financial company, but actually looking at policy and strategy. Kind of what is some advice you've learned over the years, and then some mentors?
That's a great. I mean, gosh, right? I did not know you were going to be asking me that question. It's a great question. I think one thing I have learned, particularly in this role, dealing with a subject matter that can be very sensitive for people, and where people have pretty strong emotions, understandably, is to really make sure that the analysis that we're doing is totally objective, totally neutral. And I do feel like looking at it through an economic lens or a markets lens is so helpful, because you can just say, I might personally have a view, or some client may have a personal view on X or Y. But if you just sort of look through the objective lens of the markets or economic impact, it kind of neutralizes all of that and diffuses the sort of the emotion. So if people are, courageous enough to tackle politics every day in their day-to-day life, I
think you're kind of crazy, to be honest. We love what you do, but I wouldn't want to do it. Oh, my goodness.
Don't make it personal. Be sort of as objective and as neutral as possible, because that's really what our clients pay us to do, is to be as neutral in our analysis of what's happening in Washington as what's happening in like the automotive industry or the semiconductor industry, right? When we're doing analysis for other industries. In terms of mentors, I do take kind of the mosaic theory approach of really trying to pick and choose advice from lots of different people who have been much more, senior, like the Mohammed El-Arians of the world. He's been a big mentor of mine. He was the former CEO of PIMCO, and you still see him, I'm sure, on CNBC and Bloomberg. He's doing wonderful things at Queen's College in England. But also for my peers. I just feel like we have, like you all, there's just a lot of talent with whom we are able to work with. And it's hard for me to sort of say I've had one or two just singular mentors. I do think like a lot of folks have had a big impression on my career, But in terms of like advice and what have you, I take it all, and I don't discriminate based on title or seniority or what have you.
One more for me, then Sonu jump in. I mean, what I'll say is I love your research because I think about once a week, right? You send the email, and maybe a little more sometimes, but you make it easy to understand. You add a little flavor, you add a little humor to it sometimes. I mean, it's dead serious what we do. We manage money.
But.
Yeah, you're managing money. You're talking about politics. We get that, but I just love the way that your weekly email is so easy to understand. For a minute there, I didn't get it. I was like, oh, what's going on in the world? And now it's one of the few emails, not few, but it's one of the many emails that I get, and I read it right away. So we're just huge fans, Libby. We are so honored you joined us for the third time. Third time's a charm on the Facts
Sorry
Versus
for all the
Feelings
tech
podcast.
issues.
Oh, this was live. I mean,
like
you could
next
say,
time we'll make sure
yeah,
we
you
look a
just
little bit better. We're not
start
like,
in one room, go to another room. Yeah,
Maybe
go ahead.
we
With
should
final,
definitely do
final
this in
one.
person. I mean, you guys come to New York
That's a thought.
or Newport Beach. I know you all were just out at Newport Beach. You seem very happy there, by the
Newport
way.
was nice.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Isn't it? I know.
We had the honor of speaking with Dan Iveson, the group CIO.
The group CIO, yes.
CIO.
Yeah.
And I would say, honestly, I'm not just saying this because he's, our boss at the end of the day. Dan is able to distill what's happening in Washington in this like incredibly real-time way and just like pick out the most salient points and how it's going to impact our clients' portfolios. Like it's kind of amazing. So he may read my emails or may not, but he is like, he's just very efficient about taking expertise from the various sort of sector specialists, if you will, and then, making hopefully money for our clients. So he's incredibly impressive.
He's awesome. I was just, maybe you'll finish on that note. How important do you think, like the stuff you do on a day-to-day basis, assessing policy, what may be coming, what may not be coming? Do you think it's more important to the equity market or bond market, at least over the short term? I mean, the long term, obviously, policy matters, all of that. But
yeah,
I would say short periods of time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're a bond group, so I would say, it matters what's happening. From fiscal policy, it matters like from a GDP perspective, which impacts the Fed and what have you. So I do think it has a lot of like on a macro level, it probably impacts. I would say probably both of them. But we're anything that's sort of going to like help to determine what happens with the Fed and what like their view on inflation and rates and what have you, I think is a pretty important input. I would say though, Sonu, interestingly, that when we have these big pieces of legislation where I see like a lot of, helpful impact, from feedback is at our sector desk. So, I've been dealing with engaging with our renewables folks, like what's going to happen to the Inflation Reduction Act if Trump is reelected, and what does that mean for our EV battery position or what have you? We're, working with our agency mortgage desk about talking about if Trump gets elected and what does he do with conservatorship? Does he kick the GSEs out of conservatorship, and what does that mean for our agency MBS position? So I feel like in some ways the macro is important for sure, but it's almost like the sector implications of these policy changes where you can really actually see the alpha, honestly.
Well, it sounds like we'll just have to have you back because there's a bunch more questions that are coming down the pike. Sonu and I have one job. Yes. Sonu and I have one job. That's to keep this on time. I see we're at 45 past the hour. Libby, we have to say thank you so much for joining us. Have a great election season, a good year. I know it's rough on you sometimes. Yeah.
I'm sure we'll speak with you again if you have the time. Maybe you'll do this live. I don't know.
Yep. And thank you, Ian. Thank you, Ian, for making it happen. I know we're going to play a video right now. Libby, we'll chat soon. Take care. Go ahead and play the video, guys. Bye-bye. Thank you.
See ya.
Hey, we're jumping right in.
Right. Hey, Barry, how are you?
Doing well. This is Barry Gilbert, Grant Engelbert. We're in just to give Sonu and Ryan a little bit of a break. We're colleagues of theirs at Carson. Play a little bit more of a role behind the scenes with what we're doing, but along with the two of them and our wonderful boss Jessica Golson, we're the leadership team within the research department here. Grant, what do you think of the day so far?
It's been great. Hopefully this is a much needed bathroom break for everyone watching. But I think it's been really well balanced. We've heard some similar themes between tech, but with Libby's talk and what we're going to get, coming up with Neil Dutta, I'm really excited to kind of see the various places that we're going with within a short period of time. So I've really enjoyed myself.
Now, we just had a chance to talk about politics, and politics is supposed to be the third rail of anything these days. Thinking about it on the level of advisors working with investors, is there a piece of advice that you have around the political season that's coming up? Because I know it can be a challenge.
I think what Libby mentioned there at the end was fantastic in terms of taking the emotion out of it, which is really difficult in politics, of course. But thinking of it through a market and economic lens, like they try to do at PIMCO, as difficult as that may be with an organization that's all across the country, like PIMCO, in the world, that any organization may be, taking those considerations out of the political conversation are difficult, but I think really important. And that's something, we talk about in our, market analysis as well. If you kind of really back things up and look long-term, of course, there's going to be implications of one party versus another and their impact on the markets. And Libby mentioned some of that as well. But realistically, markets go up over time. That's what happens. And Ryan does a good job of displaying that through the analysis that he does with the market cycle via the election cycle as well.
Yeah, I know that people say that it's a tough environment because it's an environment with a lot of conflict. The upside for that is actually that people are being very passionate about politics, and that is healthy for politics. It's not healthy for investing. And so I think that that's one of the hardest things. All of these passions that are actually good for our political process are really bad for being an effective investor. And it's hard to be objective within that context. That's part of what we're going to do. We're really starting to launch into our content around the election over the next couple of weeks. But it is really hard to do, and that will always be our aim, is to really focus on the market aspects of what we're doing.
That is a great point. You want people to get out there and vote, but you don't want them to change their portfolios as a result of that vote. So that's a great point. Barry, anything from Dan or Cathie's conversation that really stood out to you? I mean, they were both fantastic.
I'm kind of fascinated by AI. I think conversations about how it will evolve as an investing theme are really complicated. I think about the Magnificent Seven sometimes, and I think about Amazon in particular. And Amazon started out as an online bookseller, right? That was their entry into the business, and they've become just this incredible, innovative behemoth with what they do. And it makes me think sometimes that somewhere out there, as AI begins to develop, there's going to be some firm that's essentially the equivalent of an online bookseller, and that's the firm that's going to take off and be really interesting. So I think there are a lot of great places to invest. I think the conversation right now is too quick to really go into that in any depth. But I think part of the story is that we don't know some of the key places where this is going to come from. On the other hand, at the peak of the tech bubble, obviously there were some companies that were quite large that couldn't follow through on the promise that they actually had. So I am a real kind of optimist when it comes to AI, an optimist on the power of AI, that it's going to surprise us in so many ways, but also an optimist on AI actually being a positive force overall. But the investing story is it's tough. It's challenging to sort it out.
Yeah, it's all great points. So yeah, is it a Home Depot or something like that we didn't expect that becomes this this leader in AI. I'm just throwing Home Depot out there as something not necessarily related, but I'm sure are considering how they can use AI. I did think Dan mentioned a couple of things that stood out: the 95 moment versus the 99 moment. Like we still have this runway to go, and we've talked about this mid 90s comparison in our outlook pieces in a number of different ways. I thought that was an important piece, that we're only just beginning to see this happen. And you also mentioned the word monetization of AI right away. And I thought that was important as well, as we're seeing that with NVIDIA, obviously, and other firms. There's excitement around AI, but also the market is really rewarding companies that are actually profiting from AI today via data centers or the boots on the ground type picks and shovels approach to the product. So I thought those were interesting. And then on Dan as well, I assume he was on an iPhone. I'm not completely sure, but given his historical bullishness on Apple and the things he talked about with Apple, what a great commercial for Apple, going from a cab to a hotel, all while on, I assume, some kind of 4 or 5G connection in Thailand. Pretty amazing that the tech kind of continued to work through that whole process. But the whole live stream here, I actually think really adds to it. We're not faking anything if there's a tech issue, or pre-recording, I shouldn't say faking. And so I actually think that adds to the allure of this day and what we're trying to do here on Leap Day.
Now, I'll ask you about one more topic that came up quite a lot. And I'm just going to ask you if you're an optimist or a pessimist, without it being an investing relationship. Something like cryptocurrency or something like Bitcoin, not necessarily Bitcoin, not necessarily today, right now. So not meant to be an investment recommendation, but it was a big topic. Now we've made Bitcoin available on our platform through ETF proxies, and that also is not necessarily a recommendation. But is it something you're interested in?
Absolutely, it's hard not to be interested in something like that, in my opinion. In the world of traditional finance and how that's entered into this decentralized finance, I think it's infinitely interesting. And you could tell Cathie Wood's interest level in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general. I thought that this speaks to my interest as well. But talking about Bitcoin when she bought at $250, and of course it was started at a penny, and more or less is the best returning asset that we've ever seen in the history of the world so far. If you think of a penny to 67,000 in 2021 and nearing that again today, and saying that's only just begun, and talking about $1 million plus price targets on Bitcoin is truly remarkable. And saying that institutional assets alone, just based on the ETFs launched, get us to 100,000. These are, again, not investment recommendations. And Cathie is very, proponent of big ideas and having, massive price targets that actually may come to fruition or get close, like Tesla. That has to get your attention. And I think at this point, cryptocurrencies, digital assets, maybe the better terminology, can't be overlooked. They're real. The SEC has more or less said they're real without recommending them. And so, we think that from an investment perspective, you have to obviously do your due diligence, but think about the usage there, and think about the next generation for our advisors as money moves from the baby boomer generation to the millennials and on down. How AI and Bitcoin and all of these things, women in leadership, how all of these things impact the investments of people my age and younger. And no offense, Barry, just speaking.
I am not offended, but it's true. We are going through a giant demographic shift within the industry, and the biggest intergenerational wealth transfer ever over time. But that is ahead of us, and I don't think our industry is all that prepared for that right now. And being able to have conversations about these things, I think, is an important element of becoming prepared.
Absolutely.
Hey guys.
Sonu, how's the burger?
Oh, it was good. It was good. I'm chomped it down really quick. And once again, thank you to Denise and Larry for that. And how are you guys finding it? So far, so good? Are we holding fort? Okay.
This has been terrific.
Yeah.
I really think that this has been fantastic. It's we were talking a little bit about the dot-com bubble and where it was at its peak. And something I often say about the dot-com bubble is that things were mispriced, but all of the things that people thought were going to happen actually have happened. All the potential profitability that people thought was going to be there actually ended up there. Wrong timeline, perhaps wrong businesses. And I think about what we're doing here and the way globally this simple, it seems to me to be simple, use of technology, how much is picked up, how much people have facility in it. And it's amazing.
No.
So
Just
together, all of us and everybody listening.
Just look at today. Okay, we talked to Dan Ives from a cab in Bangkok. Okay, Libby, whatever, she had some technical issues. She goes and does this somewhere else. Literally, someone pushed a few buttons. Thank you, Larry, Denise. I just ate a burger. Sonu just ate a burger. I didn't think I was going to have lunch today. Like the technology and the breakthroughs, and I cannot wait to talk to Neil next about just productivity and like, how do you measure that? I wasn't supposed to have lunch today, but yet a kindness out of someone's heart, push a few buttons. I had lunch. You know, we talked to Dan around the world. That's wild.
But I just want, do we have a couple of minutes, Ryan, before the next thing?
We got 2 minutes, I guess.
Yeah, I just want to intro these two guys as well, and the team, right? Just to talk a little bit about, look, we're not a team of just PhDs. Barry does have a PhD in philosophy, by the way. My PhD is not in finance or in economics. It's in engineering, for what that's worth. So it's probably not worth much at this point, but and then we're not, all CFAs or CMTs and all of that. But I think all of us bring a different lens to markets and investing. I mean, I lead our asset allocation team. I manage our Carson House View portfolios together with all of you, Ryan, Barry, and Grant. I'm not an economist. I'm looking at the macroeconomy and the big players in it, households, businesses, government, how they're spending and saving, what that means for profits, right? And what that means for markets. Ryan, I think of you as you're our ears to the ground. You can have the best economic models and the correct views, but you have to pay attention to what other investors are thinking as well and what they're pricing in, right? So Ryan's looking at market prices, momentum, sentiment, putting all that into historical perspective as well. And then it's one thing to have views on asset classes and sectors, but you have to construct a portfolio. Think about all the pieces that go in. I think Barry's amazing at putting it all together, thinking about these strategic drivers of returns, how it all fits together in a portfolio that maximizes return for a given level of risk, right? And then brass tacks, right? You have to actually invest the portfolio. You have to pick the products. In our case, we're using funds and ETFs. And I say this, I am biased, but honestly, I believe this honestly, there's no one better than Grant to bring the entire landscape of funds and ETF offerings to the table, figure out what we're getting relative to how much you're paying for it, passive, active, factors, all of it, right? So just to show you, what each of us brings to the table. And there's everyone else on the team who are amazing as well, equity strategists and alternative due diligence folks. And Jessica Goldson, huge shout out to her. She's leads our team. And thank you for that. Thank you to everyone on the team as well.
Yes. And thank you to Barry and Grant for letting us eat a little bit of food. But it is top of the hour. So thank you guys for that. We've got one more guest, last but not least. Not going to say who it is. Let's play the video. Take it away. There's Neil. Right. How we doing, man?
Hi guys, how are you?
Good. Neil, we've been doing this all day. so we're just going to sit back and let you talk a lot, if that's okay. We both just had burgers. I mean, someone kindly.
I took my jacket off. Hopefully, you don't mind. I mean,
you guys might fall asleep listening to me talk.
No. But I want to start again. Let's make this very clear. I mean, we are huge fans of RenMac. Obviously, huge fans of you. We don't pay for a lot of research. Honestly, people give us research. We pay for your research. We think it is that good. We're so honored that you joined us again. But before we go there, where I'm going to start. Talk about the Disney cruise. Was there a recession on that Disney cruise last week, Neil?
No, there was definitely still a lot of supply chain problems on that Disney cruise. Let me tell you. I mean, the line to go see Mickey was, it's just, I don't know. To me, it takes a special kind of individual to actually want to go cruising. No judgment. It was pretty overwhelming. And I would say, for me, the kids liked it. I wouldn't say they loved it, and given the price point, they absolutely need to love it. So I think we're going to be going to the parks next time. I mean, that's kind of why we did it, guys. It's just sort of to give them a little taste of the Disney experience. And now, I think next year we'll probably go to Orlando.
How old are your kids?
My oldest is 7. He'll be 8 in May. And I have twins, boy, girl. They're 5.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I have twins too, but they're both 7. We haven't done Disney yet. We did Disneyland, I think. The one in California.
Yeah, that seems to be. I mean, that one is probably. I feel like that one's a little bit more contained. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the Disney cruise is just. It's a very interesting experience.
Were there any bears there?
No, I did run into somebody that recognized me from, believe it or not, the Compound podcast, Ryan. So
wow.
Yeah, think about that. So that was
that was that's a lot of feedback on that one, which have been positive for me when I was on last week, and you did an awesome job on there a few weeks ago. But Neil, let's just dive in. I mean, we're gonna go. Let's see here. About 42 minutes. The PCE report obviously came out this morning. Sonu and I have not had a lot of time to look into it because we've been doing this all day.
Just real quick, titles. I know we're supposed to do that beginning of every, before you get into trouble.
That's true. Chief Market Strategist, Ryan Detrick. Thank you, Sonu.
Vice President, Global Macro Strategist at Carson Group. And Neil.
Head of Economics at Renaissance Macro Research.
Perfect.
Sorry. Beyond that.
Yeah, we don't want to get in trouble. PCE this morning, Neil. What'd you think?
Well, I know you're a markets guy, Ryan, and you saw what happened with the bond market after the number came out, right? Fixed income rallied. So I think what that basically tells you is that, the markets were kind of primed for, even the upside of the upside, and that wasn't realized. And so the fact that the number came in right on the nose, you had a bit of a relief rally in the markets. And so I think that's where we are. I think what's important is that, yes, January represents a temporary setback, but what's the underlying story around inflation? My view is that inflation is still kind of on a glide path lower. There were some idiosyncratic factors that kind of drove up core inflation in particular in January. It remains to be seen whether that will be repeated. But I think whenever you have a data point doing something like this, it's always wise to just kind of go back to first principles, right? And so are households telling us that their inflation expectations are surging? No, they're not. In fact, that's continuing to improve. Household inflation expectations in the short run are normalizing. What about the labor markets? Are the labor markets reheating? There's not much evidence of that either. I mean, if you look at the employment cost index as an example, that's running at about 3.5%. We know the quits rate is down. We know productivity is up. So if compensation growth is running 3.5% and productivity is running about 1.5 to 2, then you're talking about basically an inflation number that's in line with the Fed's objective. So these numbers bob around for reasons sometimes, it's never a straight line. Markets don't correct by going sideways. I mean, it just, that's not how it works. But I think, by the spring, we might be looking back on this January month of inflation and say, well, that was probably a head fake.
What's your story of the economy right now?
My story of the economy is things are fine. I mean,
I think that's good.
I think, there is, to me, I would say the consensus is starting to come around a little bit to the idea that growth is better. So you see that in things like the blue chip estimates, consensus estimates. Bloomberg News has their consensus estimate. Those numbers are coming up. But I still continue to think that people are just kind of anchoring to the same sort of views here where, as an example, we have GDP nowcasts, right? They're coming in 3%-ish. And so naturally, everyone's marking to market their near-term forecast. But there's still this expectation that things will slow down precipitously in the second quarter. And we've seen that repeatedly over the last year and a half, right? Where growth is fine right now, but is it going to stay that way? And so there's this sort of, so people are continuing to put a lot of currency behind this long and variable lag story. And I don't think the lags are nonlinear. There's this view that, the economy can deal with it for a while, and then all of a sudden it stops dealing with it. That's not really how it works in practice. And in many cases, the lags have shortened quite a bit. because of the way the Fed communicates. I mean, think about it. The Fed broke the U.S. housing market without even hiking. They did that in 2022. So there's that. And of course, the financial markets, if you look at the financial markets, I mean, most of the shock has already been absorbed. So I think the consensus is still anchoring to long and variable lags. And my sense is that, people are going to be flat-footed into the second quarter as well, because it's unlikely that growth will slow as much as people are saying, particularly at a time when we're seeing cyclical areas of the economy begin to light up. I mean, you guys know this. I mean, for the longest time, ISM, like, let's run our entire asset allocation process off the ISM. And now that thing is about to go above 50. If not this month, probably pretty soon. I mean, new orders are already there. So now what? I mean, I think it's kind of curious that a lot of the people that have been screaming about ISM for the last year, all of a sudden have kind of, oh, well, no, maybe things are picking up. I mean, if that's the indicator that you needed to kind of understand that, I mean, I think you're using the wrong framework, frankly. I mean, to me, it was obvious 6 months ago. We were just bleeding inventories too much, given the growth in consumption. And so it was inevitable that manufacturing was going to pick up.
So just so people know this, in case you didn't, Neil was one of the very few economists this time a year ago that was saying, listen, there's probably not going to be a recession. You pointed out some of the positives. Jeff DeGraff did amazing technical work, talked about potentially a bull market, and obviously those things played out very, very nicely. And I'm with you on the real world things. I joked before trying to buy Taylor Swift tickets late in 22 for my daughter. Just right now, my daughter wants to go see Olivia Rodrigo, pretty popular singer. Her tickets are like $600. Like Olivia Rodrigo. I mean, it's like we're not in a recession when people are spending $600 to go see Olivia Rodrigo. I mean, that's the real world stuff, right, Neil? We can talk M2, we can talk yield curve, we can talk ISMs, but it's the real world stuff. Go to a steakhouse, they're all packed. It's like there's no recession. Are we on to something there?
Well, I mean, I like looking at the anecdotes, but I mean, I tend to follow the data. So in my case, I mean, my wife and I are going to the Craig David concert in New York.
Okay.
That's in May. If you don't remember, I mean, but we're like geriatric millennials, right? So Craig David was like, I mean, that's the new play. Is that, I mean, I remember my wife and I a few months ago, we went to go see Boys to Men.
Yep.
In our local like town center performing arts theater. So they used to sell at MSG. Now they're playing Bergen County, New Jersey. But hey, I mean, but that was packed too. So look, I mean, I think that there's still. I think you'll find this interesting. I mean, remember that headline that came out not very long ago, maybe it was like in the last week, where the news media reported, well, people are spending more of their disposable income than ever on food.
Oh, and yes.
And then you peel back, you open up the hood and you say, well, actually, they're spending more on dining out than they are on grocery stores. So in other words, it's like, it's one of these things like, to borrow from our former president, like the headline is real, but the news is fake, right? I mean, so the data are real, but the news is fake, right? So the implication is that people are kind of stretched, they're down on their luck and so forth. But in reality, it's the discretionary piece of the food basket that's actually rising more rapidly. So I still think that at the end of the day, what matters is our income's growing. Right. And so, people always ask, like, when is consumer spending going to slow down? When are these things going to normalize? When is goods going to come back to its pre-pandemic trend? I mean, the only thing that's going to make that all happen is job loss, frankly. I mean, so absent that, consumption will continue. I think people may, I think it's sort of the way it works is if you have a job, you'll figure out a way to meet your consumption demand, right? Like, am I going to save a little bit less? Am I going to shift my spending around a little more? But ultimately it's, I think it's all about real income growth, and real incomes. Just this morning, we learned real incomes, excluding transfers, are running about 3% over the last 12 months. The growth over the last 3 months has been somewhat stronger than that. So if that's what's happening, and that's a key determinant of recession, at least by the NBER, then look, it's highly likely that the consumption, that at a minimum, that puts a floor under consumption.
Right. Speaking of, like, going back to, you mentioned long and variable lags. I actually like a phrase you've used in the past, the lags between monetary policy and what happens to the economy are short and predictable, right? And I think I've never heard anyone else say it that way, but that's really neat. And is that why everyone got that recession call wrong? Because the entire framework was based on long and variable lags, and that's why a lot of people are waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Well, I mean, it's like one of these things where there's some truth to it, but you're right there. There's some truth to long and variable lags in the sense that, okay, so companies need to refinance their debt. They're doing it at higher rates. That means that their cash flow is eroding. If you're someone on an adjustable rate mortgage and you're recycling into a higher rate, that's going to obviously mean that you have a higher monthly payment, which erodes your disposable income. So there's an element of it. But if you listen to the way people talk about it, right, it's like, well, it's 18 months or 12 months or 6 months, and I don't know exactly when, and but there's something out there. I mean, that to me is what I take issue with, right? I mean, because it's just not credible, right? I mean, it's like this sort of time dependency argument that makes really no sense. You have to look at the data and try to understand how it's going to play out. So I think part of it is just people misunderstanding what the long and variable lags mean in the first place. It's not a time story. And I think also people just underestimated the amount of underlying momentum in the economy. If you have, first of all, we're coming out of a pandemic. There's a lot of pent up demand for lots of things. At the same time, obviously, we know the fiscal story was there. I mean, that's part of your job. You can't be like, oh, well, there would have been a recession had it not been for. Well, no, your job is to incorporate an aggressive fiscal response into your baseline outlook. And to the extent that people weren't doing that and they weren't accounting for all the mana that was coming out of DC, that's on you, But I also think for me, what was most important, and I think what I was sort of pointing out relative to others is that there was a huge shock when Russia invaded Ukraine, right? Like, so you had a big spike in food and energy prices, and you had the Fed really hawked up, right? I mean, they were going, we're not thinking about doing 75 at this time. Then they're doing them over and over and over again, right? I mean, they're leaking it out to the Wall Street Journal and all the rest of it. So that's the time to be very cautious. And that's when I myself was quite cautious in the middle of 2022 because of that. It's whenever you see a commodity shock taxing household incomes, at the same time the Fed is very hawked up, that is a recipe for bad news for the economy. But by the end of the year, that shock was fading, and the Fed was kind of taking baby steps to the exit, right? I mean, they weren't going 50 anymore. They were sort of doing 25s. Obviously, the food and energy story was, gas prices, as an example, ended the year about where they started. So, and the labor markets were still kind of hanging in there. So, in other words, the labor markets were not slowing as quickly as inflation was, and that drove up real incomes in the early part of 2023. And so that supported consumption. And I think that's why we didn't have a recession.
So this is live on Leap Day, Facts versus Feelings with Ryan and Sonu, being joined by Neil Dutta over at RenMac. We got about 30 minutes to go, Neil. One thing, this has been great so far. One thing I think is really cool that I've noticed you guys have been doing more of lately, it seems like, you've got a podcast now, a public podcast. You now have a weekly email that I believe is, it's free, right? I mean, people can sign up for this weekly email. You want to talk about some of those things if people, aren't paying you for it, but they can get some of it for free, a little taste to learn more about the amazing work that you and the team are doing. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ryan. Well, as you know, I've been on the sell side my entire career. Now, things are obviously changing. I mean, research is, as you know, much more democratized now than it was when I first started in the business, right? So there's been sort of, there's less gatekeeping, and that's good. It creates more competition. It also means that people have to ignore the bad players, and there are many of them, doomers and so forth.
Oh, yeah.
As you know.
Fight with them sometimes. Try not to. But
yeah, there's times to have those views and times not to. Yeah. Most of the time it's not, right? So, as you know, but as a business, we're trying to figure out ways of reaching new audiences, right? I mean, that's what this is about. And so, RIAs, individual investors, obviously people that don't have the budget for, big like big institutional budgets to pay for research that don't require as much, of a high touch kind of service. That's why we're doing this. But it's also just to get our views out there, because I think that's an important part of just developing our own brand, right? I mean, the more people know you, I mean, it's highly correlated, right? You will get more people to pay for you if more people know who you are, and if that means that you have to give away a few things for free, so be it. I mean, I think it is what it is. That to me is just a very small taste of what we do. We obviously have a wide range of analysts that cover different areas of the macro landscape. And what we put up on Twitter or LinkedIn, that's just a fraction of what our paying customers get.
Yeah, so I'm one of the few people who uses Google Podcasts. It's literally going away in a month. Call me old fashioned, but your podcast on here just simply called RenMac. You can subscribe, and it's comes out usually on Friday. It's like 20 minutes, right? Steve does the policy, you do your lane, and then obviously Jeff does his lane. I love your podcast for 20 minutes, just kind of a review of what's going on out there, totally free. And then again, you can get your taste, and believe me, once you get a taste of RenMac, you guys are going to love it.
Same thing. I mean, I read all your stuff anyway, the fee you can pay for, but I almost never try to miss the podcast. So every Friday. So that's great. Yeah, no, that's great. Speaking of Twitter, you guys put, I don't know who does your Twitter posts?
That's the question.
That's a good question. I mean, it's sort of a free for all. So Jeff and I are the ones that post on it. We don't have our own Twitter. We have our own LinkedIn's, but we don't do our own Twitter. We just have a company Twitter. And if Jeff has something interesting to say, he'll go out and say it. If I have something interesting to say, I'll go out and say it. Well, of course, we'll always repost like things that we've done on the media and for in articles on the journal or something like that, we'll repost that. But that's sort of like a repository of all the things happening at RenMac and all of our views, in terms of our in-house analysts.
Nice. I bring that up because I think it was last week you had a tweet out there saying productivity growth is hard to forecast. And if we are in a boom, something we'll see is upward revisions to consensus growth. You already mentioned that, right? Consensus growth to GDP.
Well, I mean, I don't know that that's a function of productivity. I mean, so one of the things you notice about consensus GDP forecasts is that surprises tend to be correlated over fairly long periods of time, right? So as an example, in the late 90s, really from 95 through 2000, you had essentially a 5-year period where the consensus was chronically underestimating growth, right? So folks started off the year at around 1.5%, 2%, let's say. And then by the end of the year, the estimates were up to 3%, 4%. That happened year after year. Now that typically happens in that happens when you have a productivity shock, positive productivity shock. By contrast, and then by the time the cycle matures, which was like in the 2000s, then the consensus is kind of getting on the right side of the 8 ball. And you don't really see many revisions. Similarly, in the 2010s, it was exactly the opposite that happened, right? I mean, if you recall, every year, consensus forecasters, equity market strategists, they had a very strong earnings and economic outlook to begin the year. And by the end of the year, those numbers came down, generally speaking. And that happened year after year. Now, that's the flip side of what happened in the 90s. We had a productivity boom in the 90s, and following the financial crisis, we had a bit of a productivity bust. Productivity growth was quite sluggish from 2010 to 2015. Now GDP growth has been going up. I mean, expectations, right? So this happened. I mean, last year, around this time, the consensus was expecting almost no growth in the first half of 2023. Obviously, we basically grew like 2.5%, 3% almost in 2023, fairly consistently if you look at private demand over the year. And it looks like it's happening again. Now, I don't know whether that's a function of productivity. I mean, mechanically it is, but right. I mean, the productivity that we're seeing, I think, it has, my experience is that if people are talking about something, then it's probably not yet in the data, right? I mean, that's kind of the solo paradox, right? It's so, we see all the productivity in the AI and ChatGPT, it's all around you, but it's not yet in the statistics, because it takes time for people to kind of make the knowledge investment to use the new technologies out there as efficiently as they can. So there's a bit of a learning curve involved. And so that's why, in my opinion, the AI story would probably just be gravy. I mean, maybe that has the potential to be like a game changer. And I mean, I think you can make a reasonable case that it may be. I think I heard one of your speakers before is making that exact case. Certainly, when I look at things like total factor productivity, right? Like that's kind of the economist catch-all for stuff that we can't explain, right? I mean, the innovation that's out there.
Sure.
That hasn't been, I mean, right? Like this is sort of the old Robert Gordon argument, right? I mean, back in the whole secular stagnation thing where it was like, the new stuff that we're coming up with now is not the same thing as like building out an electrical grid and the steam engine or whatever. I mean, so maybe the argument is like, well, maybe we're due for something. I mean, it's impossible to predict like what the game-changing technology is going to be. But I would say that most of the productivity growth that we're seeing, in my view, is primarily a function of like a normalization of the economy and the fading of the bullwhip dynamics that we've had in the economy, right? I mean, it's very difficult to have productivity in the labor market if everyone's quitting their jobs every few months, switching to a new one. I mean, you have to kind of keep your seat warm in order to get good at the job you're doing, right? Like, so the fact that quits are normalizing is probably going to be good news for productivity because it means that people are attached to their jobs longer.
Yeah.
And the longer you stay in your role, the more efficient you get at it over time. And so that's helpful. That probably can continue for some time here. And so, and then the other thing I would say is that we probably have some kind of capital spending boom that's out there. I mean, if you look at business equipment spending over the last year, there was actually no growth in 2023 in business equipment spend, right? All the improvement in non-residential investment was from structures, which is sort of this, kind of weird CHIPS Act crowding in of some, factories and things like that. But there was not really much investment in sort of traditional equipment when we think of like CapEx. And so that probably changes this year. I mean, the biggest driver of investment spending is just an accelerator effect. So if people think growth is picking up, then they tend to, CEOs are more confident, recession risks have gone down. So of course, investment spending should go up. At the same time, it's really difficult to push the labor market any harder than it's been pushed, right? I mean, how much lower can you really get the unemployment rate? So in other words, capital spending is likely to outrun the growth in labor markets. And so if that's the case, you get capital deepening, which should in turn support labor productivity.
That was really interesting. I want to take this a different direction for a second. So obviously you work with Jeff, right? Jeff DeGraff, one of the greatest technicians to ever walk the face of the earth. And I want to talk about your career a little bit, because obviously you worked for Rosie for a while, I know, and I'm not sure where you bounced around, but eventually you made the decision to go from maybe, I'm going to call it, I hope this comes out, like a nice, cushy corporate job to go work for, a small research shop that's just starting off. So you had to take that chance and believe in yourself, believe in what Jeff was doing. And obviously, I hope it sure feels like it's working wildly for you. We have a lot of individual advisors that listen to this, small business owners. How did you know it was time in your career to take that chance from leaving a solid job for taking a chance on betting on yourself?
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, obviously, I did work at Merrill Lynch for, I think, 8 years.
Okay.
And I worked under David Rosenberg, and also Ethan Harris, who recently retired.
Okay.
So that was kind of a good background because, Rosie, he's sort of a great, he's like a marketing machine. Like if you want to think like, what is a Wall Street economist supposed to do? Him. That's what you're on the phone. You're at, like, find me at the nearest tarmac. I mean, kind of like you're meeting with accounts, clients, you're publishing all the time. I mean, it's just the sheer volume of things that he would do for his clients, for the clients of Merrill was just enormous. And that kind of gave me an early sense for what a Wall Street economist should do. And now obviously one of the things that happen at a Wall Street, at a bank, is that the macro people aren't going to be on the morning call every day, right? I mean, you're not going to have the salespeople pitch the macro stuff every day. They want to be on the phone with their accounts about, company XYZ. Maybe, you know, I mean, you're not going to, right? I mean, maybe it's corporate credit guys aren't going to want to talk about macro all the time. So you're kind of competing with a lot of people for space, right? I mean, for space on the front page. And at a smaller shop, I don't have that problem. RenMac, all we do is macro. We want to be the go-to source for how you incorporate macro thinking into your investment process. And I don't have to compete with anyone to get time on our morning call. You know, we have a morning call with our sales team every day, you know, and we have salespeople, you know, all over the country, in Europe, right? And so I don't need to, you know, worry about, am I going to get to talk to my sales team today? I will. And, you know, and that's a big part of how we kind of distribute our views, is having a good sort of macro specialized sales force behind us. And, you know, again, that's not something that a lot of the big institutional firms have, right? They have specialty salespeople for discretionary and industrials, but they don't have specialized macro salespeople. And so in some respects, you know, macro can sometimes become an afterthought in a lot of the big shops. So that's kind of why I took the leap. You know, I think do you want to do a lot of things not well, or do one thing very well? And I think, you know, for me, that was the trade that I made by going to a smaller shop.
Seems like it's working out nicely.
Let me jump in just for a second. That was awesome. Just hold that thought for a second, Sonu. So we're going to give another plug for St. Jude. Feel free, Chelsea and or Sam, and put that up there. I think there it is, events.stjude.org/leap day, up to $850, which is awesome. This obviously is free, right? We're doing this all day, but you know, if you want to say thank you for a lot of the work that we're putting on, we'd love if you could give a donation there, because St. Jude's an amazing place that helps so many children with cancer. And what it does, you never pay $1. If you go to St. Jude and you stay for a month or two, which is obviously what happens in a lot of cases, people don't have to pay. So that's what all that charity goes to. So if you've enjoyed it all, what we've done to this Leap Day, anything you can give, we'd really, really appreciate it. Up to $850. Let's keep it going. So thank you. Go ahead there, Sonu.
Yeah, no, actually just pulling on that thread, like, you know, entrepreneurship and going to small firms, business applications right now, Neil, are running pretty hot. And what do you make of that? Is it just something just changed after the pandemic? People started opening new businesses, things like that. It seems like it's very different from what was happening between, say, 2010 to 2019.
Well, I mean, that goes back to the productivity conversation, right? Because a big reason why people thought productivity was so weak in the 2010s is that we didn't have much new business formation, right? So you had, and you know, obviously new businesses are an important driver of productivity, because that's how a lot of innovation happens, right? And so, you know, to the extent that we have more business applications, more entrepreneurialism, maybe, that's probably a good thing. So. I don't know why it happened. I mean, I think, is it a function of people kind of, you know, more willing to take a chance after the pandemic, right now wanting to go back to the kind of corporate grind? I mean, maybe there's some of that. You know, I mean, it could be a lot of things. I mean, maybe people have kind of paid off all the equity on their homes, and now they want to go try something else, right? So they don't need the security of a cushier job, so they want to go out and try new things. I mean, there's a whole potential range of explanations for why that it could be, but you know, generally speaking, it's probably good to have more businesses being formed than not. I mean, you want to have more businesses formed. You want to have business failures. I mean, you want to have all these things. That's what makes the dynamic economy.
That's great. I mean, I want to. We've got about 15 minutes to go here, Neil. So again, thank you so much for taking time with us. You know, you're amazing the stuff you do. I want to talk about Jeff for a minute here. And I know he's not here, but what are a couple things Jeff's been seeing from the technical point of view that maybe is worthwhile to point out? And one more thing, what I'm such a fan of the way you guys do your work, because honest to goodness, at our shop, Carson Research, right? We have house views. Maybe I'm like, I'm not so crazy about that, but it's the house views and it's how it goes. What's so cool about you guys is if Jeff sees it one way and you see another, you just share it. You know, it's like, okay, make your own decision. This is how we see it. I think that's really, really cool the way you guys are able to do that. But what are some things Jeff's seen out there from the technical point of view you want to share?
Well, I think Jeff is pointing out to a broadening out of market conditions. I mean, for example, I'll always talk to him about like a lot of that cyclical stuff. So, I mean, they just put a note out recently about the broadening out of improvement in the retail space. So when you look at things like home improvement retailers, I mean, they're going straight up and to the right. So how worried should we be about renovation spending? How worried should we be about construction activity? Obviously, we look at things like industrials. Industrials have been doing reasonably well. Rails. I mean, I think that's another sector that Jeff has been pointing out that looks technically very attractive, which again, I mean, this is one of these areas where we've kind of been in agreement, right? I mean, it's always difficult for our sales force when we're not in agreement.
Sure.
It's less difficult for us because we'll just keep saying whatever we want to say. But, for our sales force to kind of massage the message, I think is a little bit more challenging. But the rail one is an interesting one because that to me is a sign that the inventory story is clicking, right? I mean, if you have rails doing well in the markets, rail car loadings are up, then that's obviously going to be a sign that inventory restocking is happening. And obviously you need to move the inventory around the country. So I think that's kind of an area where the economics kind of line up with the technicals.
That's potentially a tailwind for GDP growth then this year.
Yeah, sure. I mean, inventories are going to be a tailwind for GDP. I'm quite confident that will be the case. I mean, they haven't been a tailwind for the last year, even though consumers have been spending money. I think the other thing I would say is that Jeff is probably somewhat more bullish on bonds. Okay. I think he does. I think he, generally speaking, does view the recent upturn in yields as kind of counter trend, as you would say. So I think, and I would tend to agree with that because I think people have kind of lost sight of the fact that inflation is unlikely to, is still on a downward trajectory. So, I wrote a piece earlier this week where I basically told our folks that I thought it was wise to kind of take long positions in the front end of the yield curve because, I'm skeptical that the odds of cuts are as low as people saying they are, at least in the short run.
Right. So on that, how many rate cuts do you think the Fed will do this year, and when do you think they'll move first?
So I've been telling our clients May. I mean, as you know, I was in March. But that obviously isn't happening. I think one reason why that didn't happen, frankly, is because they were so surprised at how quickly inflation was slowing that they didn't actually set the table to communicate the March cut. And now, we kind of hit a buzzsaw with this January print. So, but you could see renewed kind of downward surprises on core inflation in the March to June period. And I think. That still makes it highly likely that they'll be cutting before June. And so, I think if I looked at it recently, I think May was like priced 10-15%, right? I wouldn't be surprised to see that going higher between now and then. So, we'll see. In terms of how many times they go, I think they'll go 3 times. That's what they're telling us, but that's not the reason why I think it. I think it's just a recalibration of policy. The Fed can't. First of all, if they're starting in May or June, there's no way you're going to go that many times. They've also now started to communicate that they want to go more haphazardly, not necessarily linearly, right? So that kind of raises the risk that they're not going in consecutive meetings. That maybe they'll go once, see how the data shakes out, go again. So, if you were thinking maybe they go May, June, July, maybe now they go May, July, September, November. Right? Maybe the cuts are more spaced out. But ultimately, I think they'll go three times. If inflation slows a little bit more than they see, then maybe 4. But I don't think it's going to be any more than that.
So what worries you right now? What could the economy looks good, consumer's strong. What could upset the apple cart, you think?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, Ryan, because I think the things that what worries me is when people don't position for the upside risk scenario. That for me is the bigger, right? So whenever, right? I think we've been conditioned over the last 14, 15 years after the financial crisis to always look for like what is the downside risk? What is it? A government shutdown? Is it a debt default? Is it China blowing
crisis in China?
Yeah, is it China blowing up? Is it some geopolitical is my favorite because that's like something that people always say when they have nothing left to say. It's like, oh, there's going to be something that happens in the Mideast and the oil prices are going to spike. I mean, it's sort of, I don't know. I mean, but I think the risk is that what if productivity continues to surprise to the upside and unit labor costs continue to surprise to the low side, and I don't know, we just have a higher structural run rate for the economy. I mean, that would probably resolve a lot of issues for people, and I think that would be right, because right now what's happening is stocks have had a big run. And it's the same argument. So stocks have gone up a lot, therefore it's time to be cautious. I mean, well, when everyone's saying that, maybe it's more prudent to think about what the upside risk could be and why stocks would continue to grind up.
So I love that. Last June, I was on with Judge on CNBC, and he asked me that. Like, well, I was bullish. Well, you're so bullish. What's your biggest worry? And I actually spun it back to what you said. So what if all this stuff keeps happening and we're in a bull market? People are not positioned for it. So I think we're kind of seeing eye to eye. And I will say one more thing, and then Sonu jump in. You mentioned geopolitical concerns. Have either of you had a chance to watch Shogun yet on FX/Hulu? Have you seen Shogun yet?
It's on my list. It's on my list.
Awesome. They said 2 episodes so far.
That's on my list too, by the way.
It is a really, it's got 100% Rotten Tomato, which usually I don't like. That means I'm probably not gonna like it. I like the 10% action movie Rotten Tomato. Let's be very clear. But Shogun, I don't know if any listeners are out there listening. Shogun's really awesome. I guess there's only 10 episodes, and they did the first 2, and now it's weekly. But I think you guys will like it. There's some geopolitical concerns and risk in Shogun. We'll leave it at that.
I'll have to downgrade, Beekeeper from my list and push
Beekeeper's really good though. Beekeeper's up there. Yeah.
I almost saw it last weekend, but I then switched. I saw Ferrari, and I'm a sucker for anything related to motorsports. So
I've actually been watching Love Is Blind.
Oh,
nice.
Is it good? Is it good?
Is that a couple thing with doing?
Requires no thinking whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's funny. But going back, how much time do we have?
7 minutes. We are at the 7-minute warning, if that's such a thing. Yeah.
No, I like what we are talking about just now because with markets and it's not just about figuring out okay, what's the economy going to do, what's profits going to do, is like, oh, what about investors pricing it, right? Mm-hmm. And right now it seems like I think we are on the same page, seeing eye to eye, quote unquote, that what's not being priced in may be an upside surprise, right? So where are you with respect to going back to productivity and the AI story, right? Obviously, if you listen to Dan Ives and Cathie Wood, who was on the live stream a couple of hours ago, I think both of them they probably have different measures for it, but they think, okay, AI is going to drive that story a lot more, right? The productivity story. So just going back to where are you on the AI story there, but also as related to investing? I know going back to what Jeff does in tech and communication services in particular.
Well, I don't have a good view on the AI story. I mean, that's sort of outside of my my expertise. I mean, I think that like anything, it's still, all I will say is that it's still very new, right? Like, so the people that are using it in day-to-day applications in their jobs, they're probably still in the learning process of using it, right? I mean, there's probably more efficient ways of applying AI to your day-to-day service office jobs than we're currently doing right now as a economy. And so to me, that means whatever productivity you're seeing right now has very little to do with what's happening with AI. It probably has a lot more to do with just a normalization after the pandemic. Now, I also think it's likely that companies will probably be ramping up their spending on AI because they have to, because part of it is, if you can't push labor anymore, if you can't get more labor, you're going to have to find ways to supplement that to meet your demand needs. And that means that AI investment will probably be going up in the coming years. And it's like anything, right? I mean, if you're making a big investment up front, there's a risk because you don't know if that's going to have a payoff or not. But what it does demonstrate is that companies are relatively optimistic about the future if they're willing to make those investments. You wouldn't be doing that if you thought there wasn't going to be a payoff. So, but I do think it's probably too soon to pin the recent upturn in productivity on AI.
No, that makes sense.
Got it. Well, Neil, we have a couple minutes left. This might be the final one. I've asked this to all of our guests today. I'd asked it to you last time you were on, honestly, but I think it's a good question. If there's some 20-year-old kid sitting out there watching this who wants to be the next Neil Dutta, what career advice would you give someone younger that you didn't know at the time, but obviously you've learned over time? What's some nuggets of wisdom from Mr. Neil Dutta?
Well, I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I would say that to get into business economics, you don't need a Ph.D. That's important. I mean, no offense, Sonu. I mean, you don't have a PhD in economics, but
he's an engineer.
I'm no longer an engineer, so take the PhD for what it's worth.
But I do kind of clam up a little bit when people call me an economist, or because I don't consider myself one. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm more of we call it business economics, but it's applied, right? I mean, you're essentially like a market economist. It's not the same thing as an academic economist. But I think what's important for people to understand, particularly young people, is that find something that you think no one else is kind of talking about and defend it, right? I mean, and sort of research it, defend it, and make your case, right? That to me is kind of how you stand out. And that's a big part of what we do, right? I mean, to me, at its core, like sell side research, it's a debating business, right? I mean, that's what it really is. I mean, you have different research providers. They're all making their pitch. They're making their case. And what's important is not necessarily to have the loudest megaphone or, being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, but doing your research and then picking your battles wisely with the consensus, right? I mean, people that are always kind of lighting their hair on fire to say the opposite of what everyone else is saying, those aren't the people that you're going to be wanting to listen to, because in my experience, a lot of those times they're like wrong, and then spectacularly right. What you want to do is in my view, is try to be the person that's right about a lot of small things and be right about one big thing, because that's not how you can really make money in this business. So, my advice would be to pick your battles. Like if there's something that you think that the consensus isn't seeing, and do your research and then come up with a cogent, logical argument for why that is. But what I would highly recommend against is just kind of always taking the other side of whatever the consensus is at the time, because that's not really a way to be useful in this business.
No, that was great. Also, I just saw we just cracked $1,500 worth of donations. So let's put that up one more time, Chelsea, if we could. But Neil, this was awesome. How about one more time? Where can the listeners find you'll follow you guys a little bit easier, the website, the Twitter, whatever. Just promote yourself a little bit more, because your research is truly second to none.
Appreciate
and
that.
donate to that thing again if you want. Feel free. Give twice if you want.
I appreciate that. So you can find us on Twitter at Renmac LLC. And if you're interested in our research, you can go to renmacaccess.com.
Awesome. Well, Neil, thank you. We are at 45 after the hour. So Sonu and I run a tight ship today. I thought we might screw it up, but so far we've been on time at the very least. So we're going to play a 1-minute video. Then Sonu and I are going to wrap it all up. Thank you, Neil. Look forward to reading your stuff. Take care, man. Appreciate it.
At Carson, we're always innovating and iterating to make our offering more complete and help advisors find their freedom. And one of the new enhancements we're most excited about is our wealth management platform, which has evolved to help our advisors deliver a more personalized investment and planning experience to their clients at scale. Our investment platform and research team have grown significantly, and we're providing advisors with more flexibility to manage their investment program on their terms. We have intentionally built a wide-ranging but highly curated mix of equity, fixed income, and alternative products and managed portfolios, along with the tools, content to power your management style and story. And we've expanded our planning offering to help our partners cover tax planning, estate planning, trusts, insurance, group retirement plans, and more. And that's just some of the ways Carson helps advisors find their freedom. Learn more at carsongroup.com.
All right.
Made it.
We made it. We made it. Unbelievable. 4 guests, nearly 4 hours of fun and learning live on Leap Day with Carson's Facts versus Feelings. I mean, Sonu, we just want to kind of wrap this up in 5 minutes. Everybody's probably a little tired. How much fun did you have?
That was awesome. That was awesome. I mean, I don't know if I would do it tomorrow, but maybe the day after. No, I'm just kidding.
I want to go sit on a couch and just chill out for a little bit here. This is
what are you going to do next?
Easy, but still, I mean, believe me, that's why I want to take a moment and thank so many people behind the scenes, specifically Chelsea and Sam and lots of other people that have made this. I mean, we've got commercials, right? We've got all this different stuff happening behind the scenes that we've raised some money for a really good cause. Maybe Chelsea, if we can or Sam, put that up one more time to raise the money for St. Jude. There's that events.stjude.org/leap day. If you haven't given yet, please consider it if you had all enjoyed what we've done the past 4 hours. But it takes a village to pull something this off. It's not lost on us from the research team. So thank you to so many people who helped us. Want to add anything there, Sonu?
No. Thank you all. This was fun to do, and thank you to our guests as well. I mean, it takes a lot to take that time out of the day. And thank you to all the listeners too. We appreciate again.
Do we have a number, Chelsea, by chance? Or maybe we don't want to say. I mean, we've had thousands of people. I mean, like thousands and thousands of people throughout the day. We'll maybe get that. No, it's not yet. Okay, not yet. But believe me, I know it's thousands of people have joined throughout the day. So thank you. And believe me, my phone, I can only imagine. I'm getting, messages left and right. So people, I think, have enjoyed this day. I know I sure did, and so no, you did too.
It was a blast. And
we might not do one of these for a little bit. We'll take a break. But and obviously this is Facts versus Feelings, right? So this is a live version of our podcast. Every one of these we will share over the coming weeks or so on our podcast, and our podcast had an explosion in listens and downloads. Thanks really to the friends over at the Compound. I did that last week, Compound of Friends, and we've seen just a huge jump. So if you haven't subscribed yet to Facts versus Feelings, please do that wherever you get your favorite podcasts. I know, Sonu, final comments from you, then I'll wrap it up, and I'm gonna go sit on the couch and chill.
I know I may walk to Dunkin' Donuts here.
There you go.
And then I'm done with one milkshake and I have to get another latte or something. But no, look, the whole thing was great. I think one through line across all our guests was process, right? And having conviction, right? And believing in what you do. I think that was, and I'd like to think we do that as well. And I think that's a big part of, hopefully, fingers crossed, being successful at this business. It's not very easy business, but like I said, have conviction, believe in what you do, and find a lane and have a process.
No, well said, and find your freedom, right? I think it'll hopefully show today what Carson Group's all about, right? Coming up with an idea and then putting, pen to paper and actually getting out there, making it happen, getting some of the very best and brightest guests in the world. Ask them, they immediately say yes, right? I mean, that's what's so neat about what we're doing here at Carson, what we're building. We've already built. I mean, Ron's already built an amazing company. We're just going to continue to push forward and push the envelope and continue to communicate and, just continue to have a lot of fun as well. So hopefully everyone enjoyed this day. I know we sure did. And with that, I think we're going to wrap things up. Nearly 4 hours of Facts versus Feelings.
Just one last thing. Are we doing spaces tomorrow morning?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah,
whatever. We'll
8:15 a.m. Central Time, spaces on X. That's right.
We'll maybe do a wrap up of this when I have time to think about it. But yeah, we'll do that. Follow us on social media there. We'll share that tomorrow morning. 30 minutes before the open is when we'll do that. 30 minutes before the bell with Carson Investor Research, what we call that on Spaces. So with all that, everyone, thanks again for taking time out of your day, your schedule. We understand things are busy. Maybe a lot of people are going to listen to this on replay, which is great as well, to continue to get the views and the opinions from so many smart guests that we've had on today. I'll just laugh forever that we literally talked to Dan Ives from Bangkok in a taxi, in a cab. That's how this day started. But we did pretty well.
You made it. We made it.
He made it. We made it. Hopefully Dan's asleep by now. I don't know what time it is wherever he is. Pretty late. So hopefully Dan's asleep. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Continue to listen to the Facts versus Feeling podcast. Comes out every week on Wednesdays. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.